Welcome in, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
This is Everything Sucks. Let's Fix It, episode 18. My name is Ben Mayer.
My name is Anthony Buono.
Today is September 26th, 2023. Big episode, tons of current events.
So many current. I feel like the more we do this show, the more current events we have on the docket.
We're just looking for that much more all the time.
It is. We are becoming experts on knowing what to look for in the news now.
Yeah,
That's
but
what's happening.
it's almost problematic because we're thinking that we're becoming experts on so many topics that we're going to have like 30 current events.
Yeah, it's going to start being, because you know what it is? The show kind of has like, it has arcs.
We have themes.
We have themes. We have like the chips theme. We have the China theme. We have the immigration theme. We have all these different themes, and we try to keep up with all of them, but we keep adding more and more themes.
Yeah, and you can't possibly keep up with all of them.
No, there's no way.
Entirely. Because you don't really go so deep when we're talking about literally everything.
Yeah.
Okay, but we should get into it. First thing that we're going to talk about, we've been pounding the immigration drum for weeks now. So I was super excited when I saw this piece of news.
Dude, I texted you like right after I saw this.
Yeah, and you had texted me, and I was already like, yeah, I saw it like an hour ago, and I loved it. So the Biden administration has announced that it is going to give what is called temporary protected status, or TPS, to about 470,000 Venezuelans.
That's what I'm talking about, Joe Biden.
Yeah, these are people who have just recently crossed the border to seek asylum here. Venezuelans who arrived before July 31st this year are eligible. What this TPS does is it offers deportation protections and, crucially, the ability to work legally for 18 months at least.
This is what we've been asking for right here. This is perfect.
This is exactly it. We're like, we have all these immigrants here. They're not working because they need work authorizations, which take 6 months to apply for and be approved for. Now we can get that out of the way.
We have open jobs specifically in fields where immigrants are most likely to look for work. And the mayors of these cities that have a bunch of these migrants, the governors of the states that are overrun with the migrants, were begging Biden to implement this type of policy and let these people work so they're not reliant on government services. And that's exactly what's going to happen now.
Yeah, it's fantastic. These mayors of these massive Democratic cities all responded, and they were like, this is a great step forward. We're super happy that this happened. One thing that I'm going to note really quick. So TPS still doesn't mean that work authorization is given automatically. They still need to submit applications, and the processing times can be a bottleneck, but this is where the Biden administration, they're so great at solving problems. Part of the announcement is they've included efforts to speed up that process to reduce median processing time from 90 days to 30 days.
This is what happens when we have a government that wants to function.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, they're not trying to slow anything down. They are accomplishing the goals, and they're trying to get these things done. They don't want this to be a political football, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They're just trying to solve the problem. And I absolutely love that. The one thing I would say, I would hope it could be even simpler. Because let's be honest, like we have sometimes thousands of these families coming across the border every day.
The other day was 11,000 in one day.
Yeah. I would be hopeful that if you just have an ID from one of these countries that gets TPS, then you're automatically allowed to work. If government authorities ever come and check, they see that you have an ID from there, they say, you're fine. You have TPS. I am not deep enough into the logistics and the paperwork to know exactly how that would go, but at least an idea.
The point is that we want it streamlined, right? We want it to become as easy as possible.
Yes.
Because we just want them to be able to integrate into the economy as fast as possible so that we could all can benefit from it.
Yes.
Right? That's the goal.
And so they're not burdening our government resources, which is what everyone is complaining about so much, and what Biden is trying to end the plight of these local governments. The one other thing I'll say, so why hadn't Biden done this yet?
Right.
You talked last week about how he's worried about touching immigration, how it's too politically sticky. And until now, top officials in the Biden administration had refused to consider the option because they thought it would attract more migrants.
Exactly.
So I totally get that. One thing that he announced, or that the Department of Homeland Security included in this announcement, is, I think it was like one quote that they had in there from the secretary that said, we want to be very clear that this only applies to people who arrived before the deadline.
Right.
They're doing the best they can to say this does not mean you can still come in and get this temporary protected status.
They're doing their best to try and say, look, that was a one-time thing, guys. It's not going to happen again. But I definitely understand the conservative perspective and be like, and see this as nobody in these countries that are dealing with economic crises are going to believe that they're not going to do it again.
Yeah.
They're going to know that the Biden administration, if push comes to shove and more Democratic mayors across the country ask him to do this again, that they're going to do it again.
Yes,
You know?
absolutely. And we can't deny that.
No, and I want that to happen. I mean, I'm not going to be, I
Yeah.
don't want to lie. Right?
Definitely.
I want more people to come in here and work.
But I don't, and this is why, again, we just need to grease the legal wheels as much as possible. Because we still don't want people to come in illegally. We just want illegally to be a much thinner slice of the immigration pie.
Right.
I think this is about the best you can do at threading the needle. There are going to be people in our comments who say, obviously, it's just going to make more people flock to the country illegally, and you're going to be burdened even more and even more. But of course, they're always going to say that. It's always going to be like you took an inch, which is equivalent to taking a mile, and it's not. Okay, to solve these problems, we need to find some kind of middle ground, a middle road, some way to thread the needle. I think you did a good job.
I agree. And I don't want people, I hate when people say like the country's full. We have enough people as it is. Ellis Island took in 5,000 people a day for 9 years straight. Okay. And that was of a country with a much smaller population and a much less amount of metropolitan centers where these people could actually go. Mm-hmm. We have the room. We have the jobs. We don't have the government facilities yet to house these people, but that's why they need to get jobs and pay for it themselves.
Yeah. And that's why they need to come in and start working in the construction industry, which employs migrants at such high rates and has a massive labor shortage right now.
You want to fix the housing crisis? You need to build. Well, guess what? Immigrants make up 23% of our construction jobs, okay?
Yeah.
So if you want to build, let's get more construction workers in the country.
I texted Anthony a report. Maybe I still have it open in one of my tabs here. But it was from a construction group that had 3 suggestions on how to best solve the residential labor shortage. Number 2 is just making sure that more legal immigration can happen.
Right. More legal immigration for unskilled workers. That's really the thing, right? People who don't have college degrees, people who are maybe just have a high school diploma or even less, like those types of people who are the most likely to go into construction, make it easier for them to immigrate.
Totally.
Now, this also goes off the back of something else the Biden administration is doing, and he's really revamping the way that our United States refugee admissions program is functioning. That he's putting it in a much stronger position than at any other point in the 21st century thus far, because when Trump came into office, he decimated it. Trump, when he ran in 2016, famously talked about how he didn't want to settle any Syrian refugees and really didn't want to take in any more refugees, period. He said the country was full. Mm-hmm. And we saw that under his administration. 2017, there were 53,000 refugees resettled. 2018, it dropped to 22,000. 2019, 30,000. Now, 2020 being at 11,000 makes sense because of COVID. But since the Biden administration has started, he's been moving it up and up and up. And as of 2023, we have 51,000 resettled. That's back to the 2017 number. And that is not even counting September on. So it's 21,000 as of August of 2023. We're not, just barely halfway through the year. And he's already almost done what they've done at 2017.
That's great.
Now, in 2024, we could see upward of 78,000 more arrivals, close to the high that which was 2016. That had 85,000 refugees settled, the highest in 20 years. So we have an opportunity here to very, very easily, efficiently get people who are in distress from the world and put them in the American economy, have them benefit us and you, and make more people access the American dream, which is just awesome. I know. Look, the reason the Trump administration did this was they didn't want any refugees in the country. And one of the things they did was they decimated the number of refugee officers. They just cut them basically in half. Well, now, in 2023, refugee officers conducted 91,000 interviews, which is more than double the numbers they did in 2022.
Wow.
I can't even imagine the number that is in comparison to 2018.
Yeah, that's That's awesome.
Right?
I mean, the exact same rationale as being pro-immigration.
Exact same rationale. And what's great about this is we always talk about we want legal immigration. This is the legal process. These people coming in as refugees are all legal. You know, if we want to make legal immigration more easy, we need to make this refugee administration program as streamlined and as staffed as possible, so we get more legal immigrants.
Yeah, and this should be harder to argue against too. Like, it's kind of hard. It's kind of shitty to be like, oh, these people who are running from war and poverty and horrible flooding and weather events because of climate change, they shouldn't be allowed to come here for safety.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's when the true colors are going to show themselves, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what people always say in our comments section. Oh, our problem isn't with immigration; it's with illegal immigration. Okay, well, how about we triple the number of refugees and make it easier for them to come in? I don't know about all that. Like, we'll see. Maybe you guys will prove us wrong. Maybe all of you will actually show your good hearts. You know what I mean? Maybe we'll be proven wrong. Who knows?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Who knows? But yeah, Biden administration, again, doing just good government things. It's hard to argue against this. This just seems like awesome.
Yeah.
You know? And it's what happens when you fund the government correctly, which I guess we should hop right into the mess that is the government shutdown talks.
Yeah.
Which is insane to me that we have 18 episodes of the show. We've probably talked about government shutdowns out of 6 of those episodes, right? Like more than a quarter of them have been about government shutdowns in one way or another.
Oh, that's so sad.
Isn't that so sad? It just shows that, dude, this is just not functioning the way it's supposed to. It's not. Everything is broken. Everything sucks, and we can't fix it.
Not yet.
Not yet.
No.
Not yet. There aren't enough 20 and 30-year-olds in office yet.
But hey, maybe the senators.
Maybe
the senators.
Maybe the senators. So let's get into what's going on here. So the Republicans have now had another deal. Their first deal that they were trying to court, McCarthy was trying to court with the hard right, the Freedom Caucus. They were trying to have an 8% cut to all discretionary spending that excluded defense and veterans benefits. That was the plan. Freedom Caucus was like, no, that's not enough. Get out of here. Now, there's a plan on the books that they want to cut all discretionary spending that doesn't have to do with defense or veteran benefits by 27%. 27%. It's laughable.
Actually funny.
It's actually funny.
Actually comical.
So let's just give 3 little highlights of what this thing will do, okay? It will cut 70% benefits to help the poor heat their homes. It will reduce funding for Title I schools. Title I schools are schools in impoverished areas, urban and rural, by 80%. 4/5 of schools' federal funding gone, and 1 million mothers and children will be excluded from nutritional aid. 1 million people. 1 million. Fathom 1 million people losing access to food. For what? For what? What are they getting in return for this? For what?
No.
Literally for what?
Nothing.
27% cut. And this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. And the truth is, Republicans know it's ridiculous. The Republicans who are the adults in the room, the senators, they know it's ridiculous. But you know who doesn't know it's ridiculous? Donald Trump. He went on Truth Social on Sunday night and he told the GOP to buckle up. He said, unless you get everything, shut it down. People who are listening to that, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Andy Biggs, they're going to listen to their leader here. They have no incentive to go against Trump.
Yeah. No, I mean, no incentive to go against Trump, no incentive to show their voters that they want to work with the rest of the government in any way.
No, they have no incentive to govern.
It's not their brand.
Right, it's not their brand. Their brand is anti-government. And when you run an anti-government brand for so long, eventually you say, why fund the government? Right?
Yeah.
Right. If you're so anti-government, fine, don't fund it. That makes perfect sense. But now what's happening is even Chip Roy is a prominent member of the Freedom Caucus from Texas. And this is him quoting, he is not happy with Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. He said, I honestly don't know what to say to my fellow Republicans other than you're going to eat a shit sandwich and you probably deserve to eat it.
I love that. It's because last week we were talking about Scott Perry, right? The head of the Freedom Caucus. And it seems like we're just peeling more and more Republicans off the far right fringe to fall in line with saying, oh, these ones that are even more on the fringe are crazy and ridiculous. And yet, because the Republicans hold such a slim margin in the House, they still have enough crazy conservative populist Republicans in there that they can stop everything.
Yeah, and I want to shout out the names. So we have Andy. These are the people who are voting no on the spending packages as of right now. Okay, Andy Biggs, Arizona. Ellie Crane, Arizona. Matt Rosendale, Arizona. What are you doing? Why are there 2 people from there on this list? Get your act together. Matt Rosendale, Montana. Dan Bishop, North Carolina. Matt Gaetz, Florida. Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia. Those are the people who are the holdouts. Mm-hmm. Those are the people you got to pick off. Matt Rosendale, he should be easy. He's running for Senate in Montana against John Tester, who is not a totally unpopular incumbent.
No.
Matt Rosendale, I don't think Matt Rosendale I can't imagine he actually wants the government shut down, but I guess I'm wrong, right? He's voting for it. But it doesn't look good. I don't think it's going to look good in his political brand.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he's running for Senate. That means you have to win a lot of the independents across the state, not just your hard right district that you're in.
I don't know. Good point.
Yeah, I don't know what he's thinking. But there's hope. There's hope because other people are in the room right now. Okay. There are other people who are in the House and the Senate who are trying to get the government still funded. So the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus in the House has put forward a plan to avert a shutdown, which it has formally endorsed by the caucus generally. Okay. So that plan would keep the government open all the way through January 11th at current levels. Keep that in mind, all the way till January 11th. It will have $24 billion for Ukraine aid, $16 billion for disaster relief, and will also have a much stricter southern border policy, essentially reinstating Title 42. Now, this is good, okay? If you want less illegal immigration, fine. Let's do this, and then let's boost those refugee up numbers by 4 times.
I'm totally happy with this.
Yeah.
I've come to the point on immigration where my problem isn't at all with more border security. In fact, I'm for it. The only way to have a strong legal immigration system is to be able to control entry at your border from illegal immigrants.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I want an airtight border with big doors.
Yeah, exactly. So I love all this. I love the $24 billion in aid for Ukraine. We need tons of disaster aid with the climate change disasters that are going to continue to pile up.
Especially during hurricane season over the next couple of months, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm happy with this.
Now, the Problem Solvers Caucus in the House has proposed this plan all the way to January 11th. But as of a couple hours ago, as we're recording this, the Senate has come to their own little agreement, endorsed by Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, which will keep the government funding at current levels all the way up for 45 more days. So not all the way till January 11th, but 45 days from today, and includes $5 to $6 billion of Ukraine aid. I don't know the exact number, but it's some money for Ukraine. Not 24 billion, but something.
I thought it might have been 18.
Okay.
Yeah, I can try to find it.
Okay. Yeah, so it has Ukraine aid in it. Now, a lot of Republicans in the House are not going to vote for Ukraine aid. They're not going to do it. I don't think any of these guys that I talked about before, the Matt Rosendales, Andy Biggs, Ellie Crane, Dan Bishops, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah.
$6 billion.
Oh, it is $6 billion?
$6 billion for Ukraine, $6 billion for disaster relief.
There it is. Okay. So $6 billion for Ukraine.
Yeah.
These guys aren't going to vote for Ukraine aid. No, they can't even vote. They can't even vote to feed hungry children in America. Why the hell would they go vote for, people in trouble across the world?
I mean, honestly, to me, those feel equivalent from their perspective.
True.
Like, they're going to hate hungry children because their parents are poor, and they're going to hate that their parents are poor, and they're going to hate sending money to Ukraine because we're not in Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, it's as simple as that, to be honest.
Yeah.
When your analysis is that thin, it really isn't hard to pick where you're going to be, right?
Exactly. When your messaging is that surface level.
Yeah. Yeah. Wide as an ocean, deep as a puddle, as they say. But so the senators the grown-ups have entered the room, and they're trying to keep the government open for 45 days. This is probably going to pass and get sent to the House, but there's another issue which gets a little complicated, which is really annoying. But now Rand Paul is not going to let it pass because he's going to object to it. So now the Senate probably won't be able to pass this until Sunday, which is putting us even closer to the shutdown deadline.
I thought the shutdown happened at midnight on Saturday.
I don't remember. I think then a government shutdown is inevitable, is what I read. I think. Again, this is happening like basically live as we're recording this right now.
Yeah.
But Rand Paul has said that he's not going to let this go through. He's going to do everything he can to block it. So there's a whole other side to this there. But let me go through a little, while you look for the Rand Paul thing, let me go through and talk about what happens to our economy if our government does shut down. So best example we have is the 2018 to 2019 shutdown, which was the longest in U.S. history. It lasted about 5 weeks. And in total, it cost the economy about $3 billion. Now, you have a note here.
I have a note here. And I said, to be clear, like to the U.S. economy, this is very, very little.
Yeah, $3 billion really is nothing.
Our country had a GDP of $21.38 trillion in 2019. And $3 billion is 0.01% of that number.
Yeah. Like the impact on the actual economic growth, fairly negligible.
And honestly, you should definitely go into the other effects here. But my general take is government shutdowns don't matter that much. Like like the essential agencies all keep running.
Basically.
Obviously, I was even thinking about that as we've been talking about this a lot, and I've been reading articles like, what exactly is a government shutdown? Because I know the president is still going to work. Like I know Congress is still getting things done. I know the essential services are all still happening. So it's only a very select few services that get shut down. And there are a few important ones in here, which is why I do want you to get to those. But I think kind of from both sides, it's sensationalized for political gain, right?
Yeah.
For the Marjorie Taylor Greens, they want to show that they're making a big impact by preventing the government from doing anything. For Biden and the Democrats, they want to point the finger at the Republicans and saying, look at how much damage they're doing by making the government shut down.
And then the media just loves having the headline, government shutdown.
Exactly.
Countdown to government shutdown.
It sounds so catastrophic. And like it's a small percentage of people whose lives are actually affected in any way.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't know that the government was getting shut down, if you're watching this video, you probably didn't know what happened.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you probably wouldn't even know.
Exactly.
But this is the kind of stuff that happens during it, okay? So clinical trials and enrolling new patients in the National Institute of Health in their online portal can get handicapped. It becomes harder and harder for new drugs to ask for, clinical trial approvals, and new patients getting enrolled is an issue. Other essential government services only allowed the FDA. The FDA was only allowed to respond to foodborne outbreaks during a couple of these shutdowns, and it prevented the agency from conducting proactive inspections. So that's a huge issue. Right now, we're having trouble of inspecting food at a regular time. Or OSHA, which is the Operational Hazard Authority, you're going in and making sure that workplaces are safe. That can go on standby. So workplaces no longer have the federal government inspector coming in during this time. According to the USDA, nearly 7 million pregnant and postpartum recipients of supplemental food aid in the WIC program, the Women, Infants, and Children program, could lose access to their food benefits.
This is one of the more important ones, except the fact that any plan that might be agreed to as far as coming from the House Republicans would already cut this funding. Yeah. So in this case, it's not really a big deal.
I would rather the government shut down than the Republicans pass the plan that they want to pass right now.
Exactly.
Right? I would rather that happen.
I mean, than 27%?
Losing 80% of benefits to pregnant women?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Pregnant women and children?
Yeah. And this is why I think, go on. I want to talk about big picture more at the end, but I want you to finish these.
Okay. Another thing that gets affected, the Head Start program. This program offers academic support to 3 and 4-year-olds would be gone, and free and reduced lunch programs across the nation would quickly pause.
That one also sucks a lot.
That one sucks so much ass, bro.
I've said this before on the show, but not giving government aid to children is like a crime.
It's a crime.
It is a crime.
Children have no agency, bro.
Yeah.
Children have zero agency. They didn't ask to be where they are.
Yeah.
Everyone deserves the same shot. Give them the same shot. Give them the same lunch. Give them food.
And don't say, oh, if you were poor, you shouldn't have had a kid. It doesn't matter. They had the kid.
Yeah, the kid is here.
The kid can't choose whether or not it's alive.
And conservatives want to limit abortions. So please, don't say that.
Yeah.
Because that's ridiculous.
It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's just nuts. So then the last one that I want to talk, two more I want to talk about. There will be $52.7 billion in subsidies aimed at bolstering the domestic microchip industry. This will no longer be able to be distributed during a government shutdown. So this puts a bottleneck in the distribution of those funds, which TSMC, these big semiconductor companies, do not want any bottlenecks. They are investing so much money. Intel is investing so much money that they don't want to see any bottlenecks. And if they don't think the United States is a reliable partner, they will go somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree with this. The fact that interest rates are as high as they are and financing money to pay for these projects is that much more expensive also means that delays are that much more expensive.
True. That opportunity cost will suck quick.
Yeah, and I feel like we need to emphasize how China literally could invade Taiwan in the next year, in the next 2 years. These plants, these facilities take 2 years to get up and running and actually producing chips.
This is like a 2027 project we're talking about here.
Yeah. And China could absolutely invade Taiwan in 2025. So like we're already behind.
In addition to the delays of giving out the funding through the CHIPS Act and all that very needed capital to semiconductor development, it will also delay the implementation of prescription drug negotiations with pharmaceutical companies that was done during the Inflation Reduction Act. So that will also get delayed.
That hurts so bad. Another, I mean, in my humble opinion, amazing deep dive that we did was on our current healthcare system. And part of why we spend so much more on medicine is because our government is literally not allowed to negotiate on drug prices for Medicare for some drugs, for most drugs.
What an absolute disaster of a policy. Like, who even thought that was a good idea at the time?
Yeah,
Let's not give negotiating power to the people for this price.
It's insane.
But it's gone, thank God. But now it's about implementing that. And this government shutting down would delay that process of getting your drugs to be cheaper. All you seniors watching out here on Instagram or YouTube.
I mean, but it also, to be clear, it trickles down. It's not just seniors. Like Medicare tends to set the bar more or less.
Yes. Last program that will get affected, SNAP. Now, SNAP won't get affected immediately. It has a lot of funding saved up. It'll only go into danger if it continues for a long period of time. So this is if it goes beyond like 2 months of a government shutdown, then SNAP starts going in danger. The longest one ever is 5 weeks. So I don't imagine SNAP's in trouble.
No.
But it could be. And now with the senators hopefully taking this up, sending something over to the House, I hope that's what passes, man. And we get 45 more days. I mean, I hope the Problem Solvers Caucus thing passes. That would be best case scenario.
Yeah, which is funny that best case scenario is still a continuing resolution that only goes till January 11th.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. But what's so frustrating about all of this is I see the media talking about how like some of it's the Democrats' fault and some of it's Biden's fault. I'm going to take a hard stance on this. I've been critical of Joe Biden. On our last episode, I was critical about his alliance built with Saudi Arabia and Israel, and I got some hate in the comments for that. This is not Joe Biden or the Democrats' fault, okay? It isn't. When it is, I promise you, I will be honest and I will tell you when it is. This isn't. McCarthy and Joe Biden sat in a room and agreed to a debt ceiling that they already laid out the budget priorities of the fiscal year. Now, Republicans have decided to go back on that deal and are trying to renegotiate. Joe Biden's saying, no, I'm not renegotiating with you. We already negotiated. We already did it. We already met in the middle. I'm not going to meet in the middle of our middle. That's stupid. I'm not going to do that again.
I think I disagree.
Really?
I disagree on how hard your stance is, because I don't think Biden or anybody on the Democrat side was naive enough to not know that this moment was coming and that there would be opportunities for renegotiation.
Well, are they opportunities for renegotiation, or is it just these guys being too greedy? You don't see Democrats trying to get more out of this, do you? You don't see Democrats trying to push Republicans to raise the debt now.
That's fair.
Right?
That's fair.
So that's what's frustrating to me.
Okay, I'm with you.
Right? Democrats aren't now saying, okay, I know we only said this much for SNAP. Now give us this much for SNAP.
Yeah, they're saying, let's just do what we agreed upon in the spring.
Yeah. That's all they're trying to do.
Okay, so the last thing, the bigger picture thing I wanted to end on.
Yes.
Where does this go? Right? So I
don't know.
I think, well, you've talked to me about how McCarthy doesn't get through this.
Oh, right.
Right?
McCarthy does not get through this.
So, yeah, McCarthy is trying hard. McCarthy, man, he strikes me as such a politicker, such a politician. And he is searching for that middle lane. He is searching for that needle to be threaded so that he can get the support of his entire Republican caucus. And it just doesn't seem to be there.
It doesn't.
And I think I've sided with you. I think, here's what I think. I think McCarthy does bring a bill. I think the government does shut down for a little bit.
I agree.
McCarthy is the one to eventually bring the bill that reopens the government. and then he gets removed.
Well, do you think he brings the Senate bill?
Maybe.
I think he brings the Senate. This is my guess, okay? I think he brings the Senate bill to the floor. It passes with Democrat and moderate Republican support. 20 Republicans vote to kick him out, or a Republican comes up, Matt Gaetz, calls a vote to vacate the chair. Democrats and Republicans, those 20 Republicans unite, vacate the chair of McCarthy, and then someone else has to fill the chair.
Yeah.
And who is that? I don't know, but I don't imagine. Matt Gaetz even said, he's like, let's see if the Democrats are going to prop up McCarthy. He's baiting him. Matt Gaetz is baiting it. And Matt Gaetz knows if McCarthy gets into power with the help of Democrats, McCarthy's career is over. Not officially, like he's still the Speaker of the House, but his career as a Republican leader is over, and he will forever be disdained by the Republican base for eternity.
Yeah.
Because he's the guy who won with Democrat help.
Totally. So he gets removed. Last week we were talking about this, and I said Democrats should help bail him out. And as I was watching that clip back, actually, I realized that you proposed maybe just a more moderate Republican gets nominated for the seat. You're, of course, more plugged into who are leaders in Congress and who aren't. Do you have any idea who that might be on the Republican side?
Representative Bacon from Nebraska is probably the most likely.
Okay.
Representative Bacon is probably the most moderate Republican in the House from my perspective. He's been in there for a good amount of time. I don't know how long his tenure is, but he is not a newbie.
Okay.
So I definitely think he has political clout. Don Bacon is his name, Don Bacon. He would probably be the best one. He would probably be the best guess. He's actually looking to retire soon. And
that would be helpful.
And I think he has a job offer at CNN to be a political commentator.
That's honestly more enticing than being a House representative.
Yeah, I mean, you say all the time the media has more power than the politics, right?
Yeah.
But this is the type of guy who I think Democrats could actually get behind. Okay. And then we could see if we could have a functional government between a speaker with a working House, a working Senate, and a working president. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited by the possibility of someone who actually wants to move things forward instead of just win the political game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, there's definitely a lot of divides between Don Bacon and the Democrat base. I mean, Don Bacon isn't equal to Hakeem Jeffries, but it's not. Don Bacon won't be beholden to the to the Matt Gaetz types. It's not going to be that way.
Yeah, this all lies on a spectrum, right? And it's a problem that I think hardcore leftists make often is to think that kind of to think this way that Trump just truthed. Unless you get everything, shut it down.
I mean,
right?
Yeah.
That's the way that you get a government that doesn't function.
And that's what's so interesting about Mitch McConnell is because Mitch McConnell is an obstructionist, right? We know that. He refused to hold a vote for Merrick Garland during the Obama administration. There's been plenty of other times where he's done his best to stop the gears of government.
He's the main engineer of the filibuster as blocking legislation.
Yes. And so now he's the type of guy who has just come in and is trying to save the day with the government shutdown, trying to avert it, right? He's in the back room with Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden trying to make this deal. And it just kind of shows like there is a type of politician that is disappearing. The behind the scenes workhorse who is going to sit down and shake hands with somebody that he genuinely hates on TV, but will get a drink with after the fact, that's kind of going away. And these interpersonal relationships are very important to our functions of government that we don't really think about. But the interpersonal relationships between these congressmen and the senators, it actually makes it's the only way the government is able to function if they're able to sit down and talk it out. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about any corporation. If your corporate boardroom or if your workplace all hate each other, I mean, you're gonna get nothing done.
Totally.
So if we lose that type of politician who's able to put it all aside and get a martini with you after work, there's going to be some trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want that.
No, we don't. Okay. Let's move on to the next thing that we have up here. What do you want to do? You want to go Union? You want to go Supreme
Alabama.
Court? Alabama. Let's do Alabama.
Should be really quick. Basically, we got a report earlier today that the Supreme Court denied Alabama's request to implement its redistricted map. This is so funny and also stupid.
It's so stupid.
A few weeks ago, we talked about Alabama's districting, and there are 7 House districts in Alabama. One of them was a majority black district. They got sued. I don't know who was the plaintiff, but someone sued them and said this isn't properly representing black people in Alabama. You need at least 2 majority black districts. The Supreme Court said, yeah, you're right. You actually do need 2 majority black districts. They sent it back to Alabama. Alabama blatantly denied the request from the Supreme Court, admitted that they denied it in their case, but said that they thought it was good enough. So they went back to the Supreme Court with a map that bumped up the representation of black voters in one of their districts from 30% to 40%. Last time I checked, 40 is less than 50%.
Oh, is it? I didn't know.
I think so.
Learn something new every day.
So the Supreme Court looked at that and they're like, wait, this isn't what we asked for. And they denied it again. Thank God. There was some speculation because Brett Kavanaugh had left the door open to being like, I could interpret this a little bit differently.
Dude, I almost shit a brick when I read that Brett Kavanaugh was thinking about redoing it. I was like, are you kidding me?
I mean, Brett Kavanaugh was clearly the only one who like could be shaky on this, which is crazy because it means that John Roberts wasn't even
John Roberts was solid on it.
Yeah. So now the path is paved for a special master and a court-appointed cartographer to make the map, which honestly is how it should be done always in every state.
I agree.
But it shouldn't just matter based on what the legislators do. Gerrymandering shouldn't be a thing that's allowed to be done by the parties. But what matters here is that we get 2 majority black districts in Alabama, and I don't know, civil rights are upheld.
Great for voting rights. Great for African American participation in our government. It just shows that sometimes the good things happen, and it's always nice to feel that.
Yes.
Feel that. Allow yourself to live in a world where good things happen every once in a while, right?
Yeah, totally.
Totally. So that's awesome. I love to see that. On the political perspective, makes the Democrats taking the House much easier.
Definitely.
Right? I mean, that's a seat that's an easy 100% guaranteed flip over to Democrats. Mm-hmm. Something similar is probably going to happen in Louisiana, and all that. So we'll keep you updated with that as the election gets closer.
Oh, yeah.
We're still a year out. Dude, when it gets to election season, this show's going to be nuts.
Oh my God.
Oh God, it's going to be nuts.
God, we have to be making money by then so we can go full time on this.
I know. We're talking to you. Writer's strike.
Yeah.
You ready?
Excited.
Really exciting.
Unions.
Another great news, guys. Another piece of just awesome news and the power of working people. Okay. So the writers have been on strike for 5 weeks, 2 months, something like that. I think it's been 2 months now they've been on strike. And in the coming days, the guild members will finally vote on whether or not to accept the deal, which has pretty much almost everything that they demanded in it. It will include compensation increases for streaming content, and it has concession from studios on minimum staffing for television shows, and will guarantee that AI technology will not encroach of the writers' credits and compensation. Now, the AI piece is a little tricky. They don't have the final language for the AI portion of the deal, but AI will be a part of it, which is a big step because originally the studio said AI is too big of a task. We're not taking that up in this deal. We're not talking about it in our contract negotiations, but that is now changed, and we're going to be voting on that soon.
Well, what I read is that was the sticking point.
Yeah.
That was the last thing that, and they were going back and forth. I think this went through like Sunday, 2 days ago from when we were recording this, and late Saturday night they were looking at the paragraph on AI, and they were going back and forth on like specific wording in that paragraph.
Yeah, because studios have an amazing deep incentive to use AI as much as possible.
Oh yeah,
the writers have produced so much content for them over the years. If they could just reuse that with artificial intelligence and a large language model, they want to do that, man.
Totally. I wonder, because ChatGPT, for all of its helpfulness, it is not an artist in its writing.
No.
Right?
No.
So I wonder when writing would get that good.
No, it's a great coding buddy.
Yeah.
But, it's not. If you're into computer science and you're not using ChatGPT, the hell you doing, dude? Get on that.
Totally. But it's not even a perfect coding buddy. Like,
No,
often you still have to go in and make changes.
Yeah.
It just gives you the framework.
Yeah, it just gives you the frame. That was a very slick move, opening that energy can. I really didn't. Oh, you're not done yet? Okay. Yeah. Now that I gave it so much attention, I hope you're embarrassed.
I am extremely.
Okay. So I want to make you feel bad. So another aspect of the story that I want to really emphasize here is how much power the workers had in this whole story. During the strike, Warner Brothers Discovery said that the dual strike is going to reduce. So the acting strike and the writer strike is going to reduce the adjusted earnings for Warner Brothers for this year by $300 million to $500 million. That's all because the workers didn't show up to work. Analysts have estimated that studios will forego as much as $1.6 billion in global ticket sales for movies that were initially scheduled for release this fall, but pushed to next year because of the actor strike. Billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars lost because the workers didn't show up to work. The message that comes here now that everyone needs to take away from this is you produce the value. Not the CEOs who sit in the corporate boardrooms and go to 3 vacations a year and has a private jet, okay? Not him. He doesn't make the value. You make the value. Without the writers and the actors, movies didn't come out. Without all of you showing up to work every day, your boss would have nothing. It's because of you that your workplaces function. And these strikes emphasize that.
Yeah.
And these types of things, I feel, are contagious. When workers feel this and see others winning through these types of collective actions, they get inspired to do it themselves. You know, Biden said in response that this agreement is a testament to the power of collective bargaining. And he says that I urge all employers to remember that all workers, including writers, actors, and auto workers, as we'll talk about in a second, deserve a fair share of the value their labor helped create. This is unheard of language of a president. I'm not going to belittle this because this is not something you would hear out of the Obama administration. It's not something you would have heard out of the Clinton administration. It's barely something you would have heard out of the Carter administration.
He's not a neoliberal.
He's not a neoliberal.
Yeah.
Joe Biden is the first non-neoliberal president we've had in 40 years, and it's about damn time.
Crazy.
It's
awesome.
about damn time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after, I have it here. After 5 months of striking, it was not 2 months. 5 months of striking, the writers have come away with several hard-fought victories. And this is it's just great to see. So
I'm just so excited that they put more pressure on the corporate executives losing their money than the corporate executives could put on the workers potentially losing their homes. That
absolutely
is awesome because it's always scary, right? Like it seems that they're always the more vulnerable party. The people who are losing the things that are more important to their security, their safety, their lives. But the fact that these corporate entities are this attached to their profits and the unions do have this much power, it's just super encouraging.
Well, that's the power of unions because these unions have large strike funds.
Yeah.
I mean, they save in between the years of contract negotiations, they save so much money in order to bail everybody out and pay the wages that these workers would have had if they would be working. And they can pay it from the strike fund that they saved up for years.
Yep.
And that's the plan here. And that's why unions are the best tool at raising your wages and making your life better. End of story.
Amen.
Amen. On top of that, we have a hot worker union summer, baby. Whew. It's getting hot in here. And it's mostly because the radiator's on and I don't know how to turn it off.
But
also because the United Auto Workers is expanding the strike on all of the big three. Well, actually, that's not true. Hold on. It's not true. I just lied. The UAW is expanding the strikes against General Motors and Stellantis, but not against Ford. Not against Ford. Now, all 38 part distribution centers across 20 states at General Motors and Stellantis have now joined the strike. This is a change in strategy. The United Auto Workers is no longer going after car production. They are going after car part production. Why is this important? Car part production is very important for the dealerships of GM and Stellantis because dealerships make the most amount of money on repairs to vehicles. Not by selling vehicles, but repairing sold vehicles. They will not be able to repair any of the vehicles if they don't have the parts. And because our economy works on a produced as need basis, they don't have a stockpile of parts ready to go. The second a part gets produced at one of these auto plants, it gets sent to the dealer to do the repair. They don't have a backlog of this stuff. So this is going to hit people's wallets immediately. And it's a risky move. because now we're going to be exposing the consumer to the effects of the strike. If you have a GM car or you have a Stellantis car and you go to your dealership to get a repair, you will probably have to wait a little bit. You'll have to wait a while.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to have the stuff. And this puts pressure on, obviously, the dealerships because they're profits. This puts pressure on the car manufacturers, GM and Stellantis, because consumers might not think they're a reliable partner to buy from. Mm-hmm. But it also puts pressure on the union. It could get people angry at the union for causing their car to not be able to get fixed on time. I hope people can see past that.
Well, I suppose, but does the union really have to answer to the people?
No.
I think they're fine. I think the pressure is almost entirely going to be felt by the companies and the dealerships, because they're the ones who are going to stop seeing their revenue come in because they literally can't provide the services and the products to these people.
Exactly. And listen, we talked about strike funds. United Auto Workers has an $800 million strike fund.
Yeah, they're chilling.
They're chilling. All right. Sean Fain knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. This strike has been years in the making, mm-hmm. right? I mean, this has been years in the making. So why are they not going after Ford? Well, Ford has come to the table and have been an okay partner with the United Auto Workers. Ford has said that they are willing to strip away a lot of tiers from their employer program. So one of the things that the United Auto Workers are fighting for, if you remember from last week, is they have different tiers of employment. And each tier of employment comes with different benefits. And the United Auto Workers wants to get rid of all that so all employees earn the same benefits, because it encourages the car manufacturers to keep hiring in more people at the bottom end of the tiers, reduce promotions, and not keep people on for very long, right? So with that, they're not really angry at Ford right now. Ford has done some other stuff. I think they're shutting down an EV battery plant in one state that the United Auto Workers is not happy that they're doing. But for this reason, they're only going after GM Stellantis with this strike so far.
I really like this strategy from UAW because it shows GM and Stellantis exactly what they have to do to get the workers back.
They are giving them an off-ramp.
Yep.
And that's one of the best things about like a good faith negotiation. Both parties will always have an off ramp. Mm-hmm. They'll always be able to tell you, okay, if you do this, I'll stop doing this. If I do this for you, that means that I want this in return, right? They always have that agreement. And this is showing that the United Auto Workers are a reliable partner in negotiations. They're not totally against capital. They're willing to work with capital, right?
Yeah.
That's what trade unions are. They're willing to work with capital in this case.
Yeah, which is also, I think it can be counterintuitive because you do hear these scathing statements that say Sean Fain makes against millionaires and billionaires and the executives who have enriched themselves at the cost of their workers. But at the end of the day, it's all negotiating strategy, right? And all he wants is to use those strategies to help the members of his union.
Yeah, I mean, what is he trying to do? He's not trying to collectivize Ford and GM.
No.
He's not trying to take them over and have the workers kick the CEOs out of the boardroom. He's trying to say, listen, I know you make 350 times what we make. Can we maybe make it 300?
Yeah.
That's all. That's what he's asking for.
Or even 35 could be okay.
Yeah, maybe it could be 5. But he's not crazy like us. He's just it's not that serious that you go on CNBC, and you got guys. Who's the famous guy on CNBC who's always wrong all the time?
Oh,
Jim Cramer.
Yeah.
Jim Cramer goes out there and he's like, these auto companies, they ought to teach these guys a lesson. Let's fire all of them and ship all their jobs over to Mexico. He says that on live TV. What an asshole. What an absolute asshole Jim Cramer is to say something like that. And you're an American citizen. You want America to be competitive on the international stage, and your first response to workers not getting paid a fair wage is, fuck them, go to Mexico? Get the fuck out of here. That's a clip.
Yeah. Of course, I would never say that.
Why would you not say that?
Because I know he has a perspective.
His perspective's wrong as shit.
His perspective's just pro-business.
And it's gross.
Which, yeah, we're pro-people, which seems pretty obviously more
We're
righteous.
pro-America on this show, baby. We're pro-US of A.
Yeah, he's pro-GDP. We're pro-American citizens.
Yeah. He goes to Trump rallies and he goes, GDP.
Yeah,
GDP.
literally. Yeah, that's most of CNBC.
As most CNBC does. Yeah. So now there is another perspective to this, that this is a little bit of an, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. I just did a lot of pro-union stuff.
This is the conversation I'm really interested in.
And this is a conversation that we have to have. Are non-union electric vehicle car companies going to get an advantage because of this strike? This is a hard question. And as somebody who is pro-UAW and pro-union to his core, I'm not afraid to have this conversation because it's important to talk about.
Good.
Okay? So on Friday, newspapers have reported in Tokyo that Toyota will be speeding up its electric vehicle production, both for Toyota and Lexus brands, to reach an annual output of more than 600,000 vehicles in 2025. Tesla is boosting up their production too. During this time of this strike, electric vehicle expansion in Ford, GM, and Stellantis is not expanding because of the strike. Well, okay, what's the big deal? Tesla's expanding, Toyota, Lexus, they're expanding. Who cares? The workers in these companies, they aren't union. They get paid a hell of a lot less than Ford, GM, and Stellantis guys.
Yeah, and something that's been in the news a bunch recently are the price cuts that Tesla keeps making to its EVs.
Tesla keeps making their cars cheaper and cheaper. And it comes at the cost of workers, right? I mean, it comes at the fact that the workers at Tesla don't have a good pension program. They have okay health insurance. They get paid significantly less, 20% less, I think, in most cases.
Less job security.
Less job security for sure. You know, so it has costs. But Tesla itself is doing well. And Tesla has done a fantastic job of keeping unions out of its company. A fantastic job. Tesla has pushed U.S. appeal courts to uphold bans that Tesla put on workers. Why did Tesla ban these workers? Because they wore pro-union shirts in their buildings. That's all it took for them to fire them. Now, you're allowed to do that as an employer at the moment. You're allowed to do that, I guess, because this country sucks. But that's how anti-union they are. Tesla has allegedly, it's not allegedly, because they've been found guilty. Tesla has been found guilty of firing an employee because he was trying to form a union. And so now we're in a difficult spot where are these union companies going to get outcompeted by these non-union companies? How do you feel about this?
I think they are. And I'm really concerned about it. I can't help, of course, but compare this to the writer's strike and the actor's strike. And there's this really clear difference that there isn't a group of television and movie writers that are non-unionized and just sitting on the sidelines like that these companies can hire up, right? All of them are collectivized in this union. So the entire workforce is taken away from the industry when they go on strike. Because the automobile industry doesn't have that, I think Tesla really is granted this enormous advantage. And Tesla already has a massive market share in the EV. I think it's got like a 60% EV market share in the US at least. So when you're dealing with that, it's already got this huge advantage, and it can push its prices down more because it doesn't unionize employees. And honestly, part of why it can bring these employees in without offering them the benefits of a union, like higher pay, is because there is a draw to the brand. And as much as some liberals might hate to say it, like there's a draw to the charisma of Musk.
Unfortunately, there is.
So as someone who, as we were talking about this before the show, as someone who is super into getting these problems solved, someone who knows that getting more electric vehicles on the road is one of the most important things for us to do in our battle against climate change, I can see why why Musk is pushing this hard to not have unions in his company, because every extra dollar he does have to pay these people to produce the cars does mean fewer dollars can go to actually producing more electric vehicles, right? Because literally there isn't enough production capacity right now to get them onto the road in the numbers that we need to in order to combat climate change. Of course, I haven't gone deep enough to know, is Tesla doing a lot of share buybacks?
Yes.
how much is it paying is it overpaying its executives? I'm sure they can siphon more money out of that. But at a theoretical level, I do understand paying these workers less and not giving them the right to unionize so that we can ramp up production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that it's a hard call. I think there's a better solution to all this. I agree that these car companies need to be using as much capital as they can to get more money into the electric vehicle market and the production of it, okay? But I think the way to do that is through subsidies done like they were in the Inflation Reduction Act. Mm-hmm. And those Inflation Reduction Act subsidies that are consumer-driven are excellent examples of that, where the cost of having a better paid workforce might increase the cost of the car $1,000 each. But if the consumer gets a $1,400 tax credit for buying that said car, it makes it easier and easier for consumers to buy the car, helping the company in the long run. Right?
Yeah, I do agree with that. I do agree that tax incentives for consumers should be greater for union-made cars. My only question is,
well, not just union made. So that was incentives for all electric cars, period.
Okay.
That's all electric cars, period.
Okay.
I think one of the failures of the Inflation Reduction Act that the United Auto Workers agrees with was a failure of the Inflation Reduction Act was not limiting in IRA funding to corporate IRA funding, not limiting that to union only places. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that IRA green energy money is going to places that don't have strong union protections. They're in right to work states.
Yes.
But you know what's not in right to work states? Some of Tesla's largest manufacturing facilities. Tesla's largest manufacturing facilities in Fremont, California. It produces the Model S, Model 3, Model X, and Model Y. 22,000 people work there. United Auto Workers, you got to step up and you got to unionize these guys. Okay. That's the only way this problem gets solved. End of story. That's it. That's the only way this gets solved, is going at the source. And there are places in California, there are places in New York. There is one in Austin, Texas that will be a bitch to unionize. Mm-hmm. But if you can get it in Fremont, California, and you can get it in Buffalo, this National Labor Relations Board will have your back, and they will not let Musk screw you over. True. Right? If they tried to do this under a Republican administration, under a Trump administration, with Trump-appointed leaders to the National Labor Relations Board, they wouldn't have a shot in hell to unionize Tesla. Mm-hmm. But now, in this environment, when you have the President of the United States going to United Auto Workers picket line, the first time in United States history that a sitting president made the decision to join union workers on a picket line. It's the first time ever a sitting president has done this. This is the best environment for unions to pick up the pace. And the unions have had a long period of being looked down upon by the public, of being scapegoated by politicians, but that time is over. Unions have a hell of a high approval rating, hovering above 65% among the public. We're seeing the gains that they're able to make. And when United Auto Workers wins this against GM and Ford and Stellantis, which I know they will, it will inspire all the people in Fremont, California who work in that Tesla plant to get a union too. That's what I think. But
I think you're right. I just do think, the cost is going to be borne by someone.
Yes.
Is the thing, right? So government incentives are great, but we always espouse how much we love them. But even then, it's a question of how much, right? And already adoption of the IRA incentives, it was estimated at first to cost like $350 billion. Those estimates have skyrocketed above $1.3 trillion over the next 10 years because analysts think that the incentives are going to be used so much more than they initially projected.
Yeah, I mean, the demand for this capital is there.
Yes.
And they're going to take it.
Well, so it's tough, right? Like we also don't love deficit spending. So the money has to come from somewhere. We're in such a car heavy country and environment, right? That we need to get these EV prices driven down enough that buyers on the low end can afford them. Like right now, and this is going to happen as EVs are in the market for longer, and so used EVs become more of a market because those prices are going to be driven down. But I feel like it's still going to take a while until used EVs or EVs in general are down to a price point that's really comparable with gas-powered cars.
Yeah,
and we need to get it down there because there are still so many people who are at that lower price point who need cars. So it's a balance that's just really I don't know. I hate landing on like I don't know.
I don't know. Well, look, the end of the day is this. We need to have a just transition with climate change. It needs to be a just transition. It is not an okay solution to sell our souls to the corporate giants to solve climate change. That's not cool. I know you'll be like, whatever gets the job done, and I understand that mindset. But what do you think? Do you have that mindset?
Okay. Well, let's say this. It's easy to sit here and talk.
Right.
Let's say we could sell our souls to the corporate giants and the ice sheets didn't collapse.
Okay.
And sea level rise was contained to 1 foot or 1.5 feet instead of 2 meters at 6 feet.
Okay. But I think this is a false dichotomy. You know why?
Why? Because
we have sold our souls to the corporations for the last 40 years and they caused the ice sheets to collapse.
Okay. Fair. I'm trying to give you a hypothetical because the point still stands that we are talking about the difference between allowing the corporate giants to treat their workers worse in an effort to prevent moving faster towards the scenario.
Okay, so let's take for a given that corporations are going to go towards a climate friendly business environment.
Yeah, for EV companies.
For EV companies, right? Specifically for EV companies.
Yeah. You talked about last week.
I won't do it.
This man cited 216 million people will be driven out of their homes if sea level rise hits 2 meters. 216 million.
Yeah.
That's like 3% of all people on Earth.
Yeah. Is that true?
That was quick math.
That's true.
But I think so.
I think you're right.
About that.
Yeah. I'm going to go no.
Really?
I'm really going to go no.
I mean, of course, the answer isn't that much of a dichotomy, but right. I mean, it might be because tipping points are kind of how the climate system is set up. So I think like, I hear you saying no, but you're really talking about like an EV manufacturing worker making $20 an hour versus $40 an hour versus like tens or hundreds of thousands of people dying in climate related disasters.
Okay. But is that really what we're talking about though? Is it really?
It could be.
Right.
It could be.
It depends on the differential here, okay? Yeah. Like I bet this, okay? If I were to say, okay, we all get enslaved to build EV cars.
Yep.
You would say it's worth it for the ice sheets to melt, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Well, that's why it's really hard for me to take a stance.
Yes.
Like that's why I can't say we need a just transition.
Yeah.
Because we don't know when we're going, like how fast we need to build these cars in order to not have the ice sheets collapse.
This is the truth. This is what I think. I don't think that this has a meaningful effect on the production pace of EV cars.
Okay.
I don't think it does.
Okay.
I think it's greed. That's what I think. I think this is all about profit seeking. I think this is all about profits being increased. I don't think it has anything to do with the speed of EV adoption by the companies.
I think that's fair.
Right?
I don't know what the evidence is, although like I'm sure Elon Musk could make a lot less money. Although like for Musk, right, all of his wealth is tied up in stocks.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't think he's like hoarding a bunch of cash that he could be giving to his workers.
No.
He could be giving them more stock options maybe, but
we're talking about but we're looking at when we look at Ford, Stellantis, GM, and the $14 billion of stock buybacks they did last year.
Yep.
That's money that they could have gone to EVs.
Yes.
But it's not. It went to stock buybacks. So why am I going to be convinced that these companies will use that capital appropriately if we don't pay their workers more?
It's a very, very good point. I concede.
Right? I don't. That's what it is. And Good talk, dude. That was awesome.
That was great.
That was fucking awesome.
Yeah. And those are the conversations I love having on here. They're really hard conversations because we are at these tipping points.
We are at the tipping points.
Yeah.
And listen, we're going to go into a deep dive of climate change for the third week in a row. And holy shit, guys, this is the best one I think we did. Probably.
I'm so pumped.
And it's nuts.
Yeah.
So I want to do one more thing. Well, we have plenty more current events, but I want to do one more thing specifically about Joe Biden here that I think is a really nice thing that he's looking at. And this goes to show you that he's not the same president as Obama. He's very, very different.
Oh my God, I like him so much more.
The White House is scrubbing medical debt off of credit reports. What an awesome fucking idea. Okay. Not only the United States is one of the only nations in the world that medical debt is a thing, but medical debt is extremely burdensome to people, and it causes complete collapses of credit scores in some instances and leads to bankruptcies. So the Biden administration, through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is beginning the rules-making process changes that will have ratings changes for millions of people by removing medical bills from their credit scores. This is going to help them get easier access to capital, easier access affording homes, easier access for affording EV cars. The list goes on and on and on.
Yep.
So in addition to pulling medical bills from credit reports, the proposal would prevent creditors from using medical bills when deciding on loans and stop debt collectors from using credit ratings to pressure people with healthcare-related debt. So overall, this is just a good move. I mean, like, obviously, I wish medical debt wasn't a thing, but as long as we're in an economy where medical debt is going to be a thing, I would like it not to represent your credit score.
Yeah, I mean, if we have private medical insurance, I was going to say, like, is this, what I was thinking coming in, is this a problem for the banks? Is this a problem for the capital providers who are financing the medical debt? But it's not that this debt is being canceled, it's just that it's not affecting your credit score. And I like that a lot because medical expenses are often the ones that you don't see coming, especially the ones where you're going into debt for them.
Yeah, to be honest, like, it honestly has nothing to do with your credit. Like, it has nothing to do with your ability. Well, let's not say that. It has nothing to do with your character of a person of paying back your credit.
Exactly.
Because, listen, if I break my leg tomorrow, I'm going to have medical bills for the next 5 years, right? So, what this does do is, which I'll play devil's advocate here, banks may be exposed to more risk when giving out personal loans because they're not going to be aware of medical bills that somebody has, right? Because it won't be on their credit report and it won't be on their credit rating. So by them not knowing that they also have to pay their medical bill minimum monthly payments and the medical bills generally, the bank might be exposing them more risks whenever they give out personal loans and stuff like that.
Okay.
That might be true, but I don't think it's going to cause a big difference of anything to function in the banks. But now I want to talk about how prevalent medical debt is. So in 2018, we saw 22.7% of Americans report that they had some type of medical debt. Now this differentiated across different ethnicity groups. For blacks, it was 28% of blacks had medical debt. For whites, it was 17%. For Asians, it was around 9 to 8%. Now, it's also very regional. Different localities and regions of the United States have more medical debt than others. Most medical debt is found in the South, in Texas, Louisiana, Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama. These are the places that have medical debt the most. Places that have almost no medical debt, Minnesota, South Dakota, Massachusetts, really good states on medical debt, New York, Oregon, California, Washington. Those are the states that do best with medical debt. Why is this? One of the reasons is because of the expansion of Medicaid. So Medicaid provides low-cost health insurance or free health insurance to people who are in low income. Well, guess what, guys? Texas, the state with one of the highest medical debt, no Medicaid expansion. Florida, one of the states with high medical debt, no Medicaid expansion. Wyoming, no Medicaid expansion. South Carolina, no Medicaid expansion. Tennessee, no Medicaid expansion. There are some differences. West Virginia has the Medicaid expansion. They have a lot of medical debt. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect correlating fact. It's not a perfect function, but it's highly correlated. And that's what happens when you don't give easy, cheap access to healthcare to poor people. They go into debt for it, and it ruins their lives. I mean, that's all you can say about that, right?
Yeah, I got nothing to add there.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing there. In a survey conducted by the American Journal of Public Health of bankruptcy filers in the United States from 2013 to 2016, the majority of respondents indicated that medical expenses contribute to their bankruptcy. So the majority of people who file for bankruptcy in the United States say that medical debt was one of the reasons.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare scenario, dude.
We've talked about before the statistics about something like half of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency that comes up. I can't imagine a more obvious example than a medical debt. Like if you get into a car crash or you just have a complication with anything that you don't expect, bam, like we have to pay so much for our healthcare that of course it's going to put these people into debt. And again, I'll say to go to our healthcare deep dive to see why it will save people and the country so much money to have a universal healthcare system.
Yeah. And people, one of the other side effects here is people are just not going to seek healthcare. If you don't have the Medicaid expansion and they're afraid of medical debt, they're just not going to go get healthcare. And then so they delay primary care. And if you have primary care, the odds of you having an extreme medical reaction goes down the drain. So now they only pay when they have a massive catastrophe, which is way more expensive than just going for your checkups.
Yep. And so it's a negative cycle that just gets worse and worse because then there's more of a cost burden on the healthcare system, which makes them charge patients more, which makes them even less likely to go to primary care, and so on and so on and so on.
It's just an absolute money sink. But this is, again, one of those things here. I want to talk about the Biden administration, and one of the things that differentiates it from the Obama administration. The Obama administration created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He very easily could have put in the charter for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to do something like this related to medical debt. And the policymakers at the time chose not to do it. The Biden administration is making significantly and philosophically different choices than the Obama administration, and he's very clearly building on what they accomplished over those 8 years when Obama was in the White House.
Yeah.
He's building on Obama's legacy. And it just seems like there's a pattern of government between these two liberal presidents, or neoliberal and liberal president, that it seems like this was all part of some long-term plan.
Yeah. There's also so much less obstruction of Biden.
I agree.
Which is interesting, right? Like, you don't hear about McConnell organizing filibusters in the Senate to prevent bills from going through. Like, Biden is able to get through the infrastructure bill, get through the Inflation Reduction Act. It got through the CHIPS bill, right? Those things were unthinkable during the Obama administration.
McConnell did try to sink the IRA. He did try. Yeah, because it was a reconciliation bill that only Democrats voted for.
Okay.
And they got through it. They got it through the Senate using a reconciliation process. Reconciliation doesn't need filibuster. Reconciliation, you're only allowed 2 reconciliations a year. Reconciliation bills are only allowed to affect the federal budget. And it is filibuster proof. You only get 2 a year. The American Rescue Plan passed through the reconciliation, and the the Inflation Reduction Act passed. Oh, man. The Inflation Reduction Act passed through reconciliation.
Okay.
If you want a quick history here, because I just read the book on this, and I have it in my mind here now. So the history of the Inflation Reduction Act is actually incredible. So when Biden comes into office, he has 3 bills that he wants to pass: American Rescue Plan, American Jobs Plan, and American Family Plan. That's what he wants to pass, okay? So he passes the American Rescue Plan. Now he moves on to the American Jobs Plan. Jobs Plan ain't going to work. It's not going to happen. He can't get people on board. So he changes course, changes it to the infrastructure bill. And he's able to get bipartisan support by leaving all the negotiation to Kyrsten Sinema and Rob Portman of Ohio.
You always say Kirsten. I have to correct
Kristen?
you. It's Kristen.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Kyrsten Sinema, I've been saying that literally wrong for 4 years.
I'm going to check myself because it's going to be really embarrassing if I just corrected you and I was wrong, but I could swear.
I'm so gullible. I'll believe whatever you tell me.
It is Kirsten.
Okay.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're so dumb.
That
God,
hurt.
you're so stupid.
That hurt.
How does it feel to be the dumbest person on this podcast?
I wish I could read.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Kyrsten Sinema, Rob Portman, they make the infrastructure bill. Now it's Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer's ball game to make the next reconciliation package, which was supposed to be the American Families Plan. This turned into Build Back Better as we know it. And the House wants to pass this $3.5 trillion Build Back Better plan. That's what they want to do. Joe Manchin's like, I'm not for it. Inflation starts going up. I'm out. I'm tapping out. There's some interpersonal drama between Biden and Joe Manchin. Joe Biden does something interpersonally that Joe Manchin does not like. So Joe Biden comes out on Fox News and announces that he's done with Build Back Better, and Build Back Better is dead. Did not tell Joe Biden before he went on Fox News. Killed it on live TV.
Okay.
Joe Biden was like shook, and he's like, this is all over. It's all done. Leaves it to Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer and Ron Klain, who works in the Biden White House, ends up having a dinner with Joe Manchin and finally swoons him and buys him his favorite bourbon. And he sits him down. He's like, can we make a deal? He's like, we can make a deal. But he lets Joe Manchin write pretty much the entire thing. And he's so nervous that Joe Manchin is going to give him a bill that's just not going to fly with the Democrat base. And Joe Biden hands him the IRA and he's like, this'll do. And Joe Manchin's like, let's get it done. But here's the kicker. Mitch McConnell says, I won't pass the CHIPS Act if you do a reconciliation bill afterwards. I won't pass the CHIPS Act. So Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer tell nobody. They don't even tell Joe Biden. They don't even tell Nancy Pelosi in the House. Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin keep this a complete secret until the CHIPS bill is passed. And after the CHIPS bill is passed, 2 hours later, they announced the Inflation Reduction Act, and Mitch McConnell is furious at Joe Manchin because Joe Manchin lied to McConnell's face.
Wow.
Joe Manchin looked at McConnell and he's like, I'm not doing a reconciliation package. I don't know yet. 2 hours later, there it is.
Wow. That is some Game of Thrones
Isn't that
shit.
And that happened. Isn't that crazy?
That's awesome.
Dude, it's awesome.
Yeah.
When Nancy Pelosi got it, she was shook. She's like, I can't believe that you were doing that. She was so mad at Chuck Schumer. She was like, why didn't you tell me you were doing this? He's like, I couldn't. I was not allowed.
That's incredible. That's the kind of thing that...
There's actually so much more to that story, guys. It's nuts.
As much as I say, and as much as I do believe that the media has more power than the politicians, being able to be a player in that game would be fun.
Oh, man. That game must have been so intense. They go to a dinner party and they purposely buy his favorite bourbon, you know?
Yeah.
They always take him out to Italian restaurants because Joe Manchin's Italian and Italian is his favorite food. You know, they know how to get the guy going. They know how to make him purr.
That's cool.
It's cool, man. Okay. So let's move on. Do you want to talk about Amazon?
Sure.
All right. Amazon is getting sued. Those fuckers. Those dirty bitches. Man, should I be cursing like that on the show?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Maybe I should hold off.
We're probably not big enough for anyone to care.
True. I mean, yeah. Okay. So Amazon is getting sued. That's what we'd love to see. The Federal Trade Commission is...
That's what we'd love to see.
We love to see corporations getting their butt whooped, right?
Yeah.
So the Federal Trade Commission is, and 17 other states have accused Amazon today, as we're recording, of illegally protecting a monopoly over swaths of online retail by squeezing merchants and favoring its own services. This is very similar to what we hear right now going on with Google.
Yep.
Right? I mean, we talked the other week about how Google is facing trouble because that they're prioritizing their own products and their own services with their search engine, which is making unfair competition environment. So what is Amazon doing? Well, Amazon has stopped merchants on its platform from offering lower prices elsewhere and forced them to ship products using its logistics service if they wanted to be offered as part of its Prime subscription bundle. This is leading to higher prices for consumers and a worse shopper experience, which is the goal of the Federal Trade Commission to make as good as possible. Now, here's where Ben can correct me. Is it Lena Khan?
It is Lena Khan.
Lena Khan is the one leading this charge. She's the head of the FTC under Joe Biden. And she has rose to fame as a Yale law student in 2017. She is young. She's young and she is hungry for corporate blood. She published a paper arguing that the American antitrust laws have failed to adequately stop Amazon from amassing power over its customers, competitors, and suppliers. So this has been a pet project for her for a long time.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for Lena Khan. I've read into her a little bit, and she is a fiery antitrust advocate. She's like exactly the person that I would want in charge of the FTC. And she has spearheaded a lot of these lawsuits to attack mergers, try to break apart companies. And the Biden administration really has not had that much success. And it just goes to show that you have someone who is young, who is highly motivated, highly competent, just to see how much the system is stacked against her, because that's the only reason that there isn't success here. And we really do need to see like a new wave of antitrust law to reintroduce some fairness into our markets and reduce market power of these massive conglomerates.
And it also goes to show you the power of the judiciary. I mean, the judiciary is what's shutting all this shit down anyway, right?
Well, exactly. That's the thing. There have been too many judicial decisions over the years that say that monopolies are okay and have established a really narrow pathway to actually determine that a company is a monopoly and should be broken up, or that a merger shouldn't happen, that we need new statute to tip these cases in favor of the plaintiffs, in favor of the FTC when they go to trial.
What's actually crazy to me, though, is I don't know if we we don't technically need new statute. We need different judiciary.
Well, we would need a wave of new cases, but a wave of new decisions. But the problem is there's all this precedent.
I understand. Yeah, you're right. We need the new statute to overdo that judicial precedent that's been set.
Exactly.
And because we've learned a lot about this, because it's judicial precedent over statute, new statute can override that.
Yep.
Right. If they were doing a constitutional precedent, then we would need a constitutional amendment to override it.
And we would have no hope.
But
we do have hope.
But we do have hope because this is statutional. Statutory precedent.
Yes.
Wow. Man, we should be lawyers.
Honestly.
Would you ever go to law school?
This is I have a fun personal anecdote about this. My parents came into town a few weeks back, and my mom's a lawyer. She's a public defense attorney.
Oh, yeah. I forgot.
And she listens to the show. Thanks, Mom. Hopefully you're watching this. Hi. She mentioned that the way we analyze cases is exactly how it goes in law school. Like, wow. She's like, you guys would kill it in law school. And I actually complained to her because I'm like, I believe that. Like, I think we're going deep enough and learning enough about it to be analyzing that way. And it frustrates me that even though we can do that, like, we'll never get the same recognition as someone who does that with a law degree.
Yeah.
Even if we're doing the same level of work. So I think I would rather just not pay for law school and have to sit in class for 2 years and do that, and just talk about it and hopefully get the recognition by, I don't know, doing it over and over again and proving my merit to people. Like, the system is nice because it's an easy ticket to recognition, but I just don't want to waste the time.
Yeah. You know what we should do? We should go back on YouTube and make a playlist of that book in total. Because we read Supreme Inequality by Adam Cohen, and we went through basically all the Supreme Court cases that were very important that had to do with workers' rights, poverty, corporations, and the rest of it. We went through all of it. From 1950 onward, we talked about all the important cases. And if you guys are interested in learning more about the history of the Supreme Court and the history of these cases that really make modern America, we'll put a playlist together of, we talked about every chapter of that book and went into all those cases in really great detail. And yeah, like, it sucks that we're not going to have the same recognition, but we'll have a democratized type of recognition.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Something.
Last thing. This is the last current event.
Is it? No, we got two.
Oh, we got two more.
God.
You want to take the lead on these last two?
Yeah. We're like an hour, 20 minutes in on current events. This is awesome.
I'm shocked.
Okay. So, really exciting thing to me, at least. Climate Corps.
Yeah.
The Biden administration has announced the creation of a Climate Corps, which is building off the Civilian Conservation Corps that FDR introduced during the Great Depression. It's a federal program to train and employ 20,000 young people in the fight against climate change. So almost all of these jobs will require no experience. It's trying to draw these people into the industry so they can grow and really be a foundational part of the enormous workforce that we're going to need to solve these problems. The types of positions include deploying low-cost renewable energy sources, implementing energy efficiency solutions for homeowners, rebuilding coastal wetlands, building infrastructure to protect from storm surges, managing fuel loads in fire-prone areas, protecting public lands, building water conservation infrastructure. So they're going to be attacking the water shortages that we have because of the increasing droughts because of climate change, the storm damage that now is affecting communities worse and worse. The wildfires that have been tearing apart California and have been starting to approach the Northeast from Canada. So, I mean, this is awesome to me. So, like always, the question for the Climate Corps is, how is it getting funded? We don't know completely, but some of it is coming from the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. For example, $10 million in new grants for the Department of Energy's existing career skills training program. Some is going to be coming from AmeriCorps, which is the biggest volunteer service program in the U.S., which is contributing $15 million for the U.S. Forest Service. And there are Climate Corps already in some states. 5 already have them, and this announcement included 5 more states that are going to be implementing new Climate Corps.
Yes.
So the federal government is partnering with all of these, which is a real theme for Biden's government, right? It's like, let's get the ball rolling with government funding, with federal funding, and then let's partner with all of these other organizations that can contribute. So it's not all burdened on the federal government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Civilian Climate Corps is amazing that this is coming out. Like, the fact that it can be called the CCC is amazing for just from a political history perspective, right? I'm a huge fan of the Civilian Conservation Corps created by FDR in the 30s. A massive fan. The Civilian Conservation Corps was created in the midst of the Great Depression, and it supplied manual-related jobs related to conservation and development for natural resources, specifically targeting unmarried men, 17 to 28. A different time, these people were segregated, blacks and whites couldn't work together, women weren't allowed to take the jobs, so different time, okay? But 3 million men took part in the CCC over the course of its lifespan. 3 million people worked for the CCC.
And the population was a lot smaller at that time.
The population was a hell of a lot smaller.
Yeah.
At its height, it was having 300,000 a year at its height.
Wow.
Which is just a fantastic program. And this is the closest that the federal government has ever come to a federal jobs guarantee. This is the closest we ever got.
Yeah.
But what was the CCC tasked to do? Structural improvements, transportation, erosion control, vegetable covering, flood control, forest culture. Sounds exactly like the Civilian Climate Corps, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It sounds exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And during the time, a Gallup poll in 1936 asked, "Are you in favor of the CCC?" And 82% of respondents said they were in favor. It was a massively popular program. Now, I hope that the Civilian Conservation Corps can be something similar throughout this period of the climate crisis, where Republicans, Democrats, and Independents can look at this program and say, we need more people to tackle this issue. And, you know, those who want the jobs and want the skills to improve our climate should. And I think that this is something that could become really popular because Republicans love people working. And this program is to make people work on something that really matters.
Yeah.
You know?
I absolutely agree. I also think this is a really great political move for Biden. This appeals mostly to young voters who have been pushing in coalitions, in climate coalitions, for a climate corps. This is providing jobs specifically to young people who are just entering the workforce. And it's showing them, anyone who still is skeptical of Biden, who's like, no, I'd rather have Bernie as my more liberal president. Like, he's stacking up these progressive moves. He did this in response to a letter that Senator Ed Markey and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sent asking him to use executive powers to establish the Climate Corps. They sent that to him 2 days before this announcement was made. So it's very clear that, in my opinion, he was responding to that letter. And especially AOC, like, there's no better standard bearer for the young progressive movement.
No.
So to see that Biden is working and in lockstep with her when she makes a public ask like that, I think it's great for turnout of young voters to be actually excited about voting for Biden.
Absolutely. And look, AOC, this is amazing. The creation of the CCC is a massive win for the progressive movement.
Yeah.
AOC has been fighting for this since she got into office. She has been fighting for Civilian Climate Corps for a long time. And during the negotiations of the Build Back Better, which I just talked about here, she wanted $30 billion in the reconciliation package going to fund the Civilian Climate Corps. Now, you didn't get 30 billion, but you got something, and 20,000 people are going to get these jobs. And what's so funny is at the end of the day, the Inflation Reduction Act, the reconciliation package that did end up passing, is going to be used to fund the Civilian Climate Corps.
Totally.
And so at the end of the day, AOC got what she wanted.
Yeah, even if it's not exactly what she wants, you got to start somewhere. And this is how legislation works, right? You start with incremental change and you build bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and this is a massive progressive win. So all you young people, I understand that Joe Biden is not exactly what we wanted. Most of us wanted Bernie. I wanted Bernie. But Biden is doing the best job that a moderate Democrat could have done in his shoes.
You can really hardly ask for better.
No,
Like,
I truly believe
I honestly, like, I couldn't tell you much that Bernie would do better because I don't know, because I think Biden is really executing as progressive of an agenda as having a split Congress would enable him to do.
And I'm honestly going to say this too. I don't know if Bernie would have been as successful as Biden.
I agree, because he's too polarized.
And I'll tell you this, Bernie would not have been able to make a deal with Joe Manchin the way Biden did.
Exactly.
He doesn't have that interpersonal connection. He doesn't. And no way Joe Manchin wants the picture taken of him holding hands with socialist commie Bernie Sanders.
That's exactly the issue. We talked a while back about why it's kind of good to have Biden at the top of the ticket, partly because he's a great contrast to the extremism of Trump, but also because he might inspire these Congress people to work together a little bit more, right? Even the progressives, he's going to say, "Hey, I want to help you guys, but I know you want to be purists, but to actually make progress, you need to reach across the aisle."
Exactly.
And we see it happening time and time again.
And it's proving successful. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
All right. Last current event, Ben.
Yes.
This is all you.
So this one's a pretty deep one. I'm excited for this. I sometimes just go onto Google News and I search climate change because otherwise these don't come up on like your normal news feeds. And I found this article that's a New York renewables debate for subsidies. Specifically, the title is "The $1 Billion Debate Splitting New York's Renewable Energy Industry." So what is this about? Basically, there are a bunch of developers in New York, in the state of New York, who have planned clean energy infrastructure projects, right? These are offshore wind, onshore wind, solar projects. They have been slammed by inflation. These developers have agreed to projects that they bid on between 2017 and 2021, and since then, inflation has made them a lot less viable, or so they claim. However, one of the biggest renewable developers in New York State, AES, says that their claims that they can't run these projects and have them be viable is demonstrably false. Okay, so there's this organization in New York called the Alliance for Clean Energy, ACE. In June, ACE petitioned the state energy regulators to increase the price that they could sell energy at. Because usually the process for these energy developers to secure projects is there are annual bids, there are annual auctions on opportunities to develop new energy sources. And usually how this works is these developers will go in there and they'll go into the bid, and almost always the bidder who proposes that they'll sell energy at the lowest price wins. Okay? So the price is agreed at that point, but now ACE says, because it obviously takes time to develop these projects, they say interest rate hikes and supply chain shocks have made the projects no longer viable at the agreed upon prices. And so they want to apply a single adjustment formula to dozens of projects across the board, which would result in price increases on the customer from 43% to 73%. Those are not trivial. Those are big price increases.
I mean, we're talking almost double at that 73 number.
Yeah. I mean, and I did in the article, it does say that this is still only like $5 a month because utilities aren't that expensive.
Yeah.
But still, like, 43% to 73%. That's a lot more than people
And
expect
you're
to be
really
paying.
trusting these corporations that these numbers are accurate. You're
Yes.
really trusting that. You know?
That's kind of what what AES is arguing. ACE says they need to raise these prices to be financially viable, and ACE says that it's still cheaper than fossil fuel alternatives to sell the clean energy at these higher rates. They say this is their only choice, is to fund themselves with higher energy prices until the state signs off on more funding. But AES says, I don't think these projects actually do need more funding. AES thinks that they purposely underbid at auction so that they can secure the project, and then they can come back and petition the state for more money and hope that they get more government funding, because where they need the money, of course, is in the startup of these projects.
Right.
Especially these renewables, right? Once you have the infrastructure built out, it's really cheap to produce every new unit of energy. So they're like, we just need the money to build this out. But AES says, let the losers sink if they're losers. It contends that projects that fail may never be viable on their own in the first place and could be replaced by more promising ones. Now, AES has a good incentive to say this, because if these projects are allowed to fail by the companies that bid on them, then they go back up for auction, and AES, as one of the big developers, they can bid, right? And they can win the projects. So already a little bit of corporate fishiness.
Yeah, that's already a lot there.
Yeah. The push for higher payouts has also drawn skepticism from proponents of public power. So this is where I think both of us lie as the best case scenario, okay? New York has a burgeoning New York Power Authority that is gaining more and more power to make utilities public in New York State. And they have spent years arguing that relying on private developers and their profit margins put New York's energy transition on shaky footing. And this is kind of a great example of that. If these projects were all public utilities, we wouldn't have to worry about this problem of, are they asking for more government money just because they want to be more profitable? We can kind of trust that things are all being made at the level of the cost. It does bring up a bigger picture question about this process in New York, right? Because you have these annual bids on projects, and they're almost always granted to the developer that offers to sell energy at the lowest price. And so the State Energy Authority has actually publicly said that it's reconsidering the requirements, and it might ask for higher security deposits for developers who ask for price hikes.
That's a good future solution.
Yeah.
It obviously doesn't deal with what we're at now.
Exactly.
That's a nice thing to say after the fact, after you've been caught with, your hand in the cookie jar here and you're kind of screwed.
Yes.
Right.
Totally. So that's where the state is at. It's a tricky situation. It's interesting that it's not a fossil fuel developer that's saying this. AES is a huge renewables developer, and they're coming at this.
AES just wants to take over all this already built infrastructure here.
Yes.
Right. That's their incentive.
Totally.
If AES could take over all this stuff and ensure a lower price point, that makes me kind of favor AES.
Yes.
Right?
The problem,
okay,
of course, is it takes time to get these projects up and running.
Mm-hmm.
And the developers who have already bid on these projects already have the construction happening, right? Mm-hmm. The process is already in progress. And these processes can take so long because there's a bunch of permitting that needs to happen. Plus, you need to build things out, especially for offshore wind. There's like a huge wait for the supply chain issues, as far as like you need very, very specific types of vessels to enable building offshore wind facilities. So they have backlogs like years and years down the line. And we just had a huge discussion about how urgent the need for shifting to renewables is, for attacking climate change is. So I think the best solution is public utilities. I think in this particular case, the priority needs to be speed in getting these up and running.
Because I think the public utility takeover could happen later.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, that's what's happening in Maine. Don't forget, all you Mainers out there watching, your election is coming up 1 month.
Yep.
Early November. I have the date here. I looked it up. November 7th, Mainers will decide whether to initiate a public takeover of the state's 2 investor-owned utilities, okay? If you believe in public power utilities and you believe in putting power in the hands of the people when it comes to decisions like this, when rate hikes happen, what type of energy gets produced, where it gets produced, and you want it in your hands, not the private entities, go vote November 7th.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
But, so I agree that we should get these things up and running. I think I agree that we should get these things up and running. And then the public utility takeover could happen later. But if that happens, are we going to see those 50% utility increases?
Yeah.
If we let ACE go through with it?
Yeah. From my perspective, like, pay $5 more per month for your utilities.
And ACE is still claiming that it's going to be cheaper than the fossil fuel alternative.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which it definitely will be.
Yeah, which we're about to get into in our deep dive.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be cheaper than the fossil fuel alternative. No doubt about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I would want more. I think I am on your side saying that leave it to ACE. I think I am, because I complain when I get handed a coding project halfway through. I couldn't imagine getting handed building a windmill and a wind farm halfway through.
Yeah.
Right? I can't imagine doing that.
Absolutely.
And how much longer that would take.
And it's not even that simple, right? Because say like you're halfway through building a windmill. It's not like you're just going to hand that progress over to the other company, right? You're going to sell your materials or whatever. Maybe you'll be able to sell it to them, but maybe the manufacturing processes are different. It's time to dive deep.
Deep dive time.
Deep
dive.
So we're on climate change part 3. Initially, I was thinking we were going to do just 3 parts on climate change. We had a talk yesterday. It's looking like 5 at least now.
Minimum. Might be doing this for another month and a half.
Honestly, we could. I do like becoming like a real expert in things. So
yeah,
I am
and
down.
if you're going to be an expert in anything, climate is the most important thing to be an expert on.
Yes.
Right? I mean, like, this is the thing that matters more than all other things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
More than the China competition, more than workers' rights, and everything. Climate is the one.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, in a lot of those things, in the China competition and in workers' rights, we've already seen, based on our conversations, part of their importance is because they're integrated into the fight against climate change.
This is the theme that is underscoring every single policy conversation in the world right now. Climate change is affecting every policy conversation, every geopolitical competition. Everything is revolving around whether or not we're going to save the planet or not.
I'm smiling just because we just stacked intensity of like how hard we talked about that. But yeah, hopefully you get the point. It's an important thing. Today we're talking, so the last 2 episodes, we've talked about the science of climate change and like specifically what kind of effects we're seeing, why it is so scary. Today we're going to start to get into the fight against it. And we're starting in the shift in our energy generation, right? So for climate change, there are a few main contributors of the greenhouse gas emissions that have put us in this situation. Higher than anything is energy production for homes and for industry, okay? So how is the transition currently looking as we try to shift to renewables and clean energy sources? What is standing in the way? How can we move forward faster? That's what we're looking at. So as a little bit of a background, historically, energy demand has tracked with GDP and population growth as countries have more money to spend on energy, right? So they have more money to spend on energy, and that energy makes them more productive, which of course gives them even more money to spend on energy, and that virtuous cycle continues and continues. And we've seen that in the US, several other Western countries, and now more recently in China and other developing countries as they scale up.
Yes, it used to be the case, or maybe you'll argue it still is the case, that energy production was the ticket to a higher GDP. But what we've seen in a lot of the developed world, Europe and the United States, that doesn't have to be the case anymore.
No.
We have now seen a reduction. We can see economic growth with the reduction of carbon emissions. They are no longer tied. They are no longer corollary factors.
Yes.
They are no longer related. We have totally decoupled them.
It's the result of shifting to a service economy. I think we would both agree.
Definitely.
Because once you're going into a manufacturing economy, you need more energy. Those are more energy intensive tasks. As we move forward now, we're in a really pivotal stage because those manufacturing tasks are probably going to be shifting out of China into other developing countries, first and foremost India, right? And we're hoping that energy demand will be flattening because of increases in energy efficiency for not only for appliances, but also shifts to clean energy for those countries.
Right.
Okay. So what's going on with clean energy? What's our progress? We don't have a ton of progress right now. Still in the US, I think maybe I don't even have these numbers. Do you have these numbers on what percentage of our energy has been generated cleanly?
Move on. I'll find the number.
Okay, thank you.
I'll find it quick.
Really what I focus more on here is the cost of different energy sources, the economics of it. And the truth is, the economics say that we should be using way more clean energy than we are. In the past 10 years, the price of electricity from solar declined by 89%. The cost of electricity from onshore wind decreased 70%. Costs have decreased this much compared to other sources because renewable energy sources don't have to be dug up and then burned, right? It's much simpler than that. They just come to the source. The wind comes to the turbine. The sun comes and shines on the solar panel. So the cost of the technology is what drives the cost of producing energy. And solar power specifically has become so cheap because they started being produced at a very high price point for a very specific purpose. And this was because they were necessary in space. When the US and the Soviet Union were first going to space in the 50s and the 60s, they had the sun as the easiest, most accessible source of energy. So they built these solar panels that were really expensive, and there were very few use cases for them. But as they started to build more, the cost of building them started to go down. As the cost of building them started to go down, it started to become more viable to use them for other projects. And this virtuous cycle continued enough to create this learning effect of solar, which basically means the relationship between modules produced and price. And this learning effect for solar is staggering. Each doubling of installed cumulative capacity decreases the price of a solar cell by 20.2%,
Wow.
which is so much more than comparable sources. It's the most of any energy source. Wind has a learning rate of about 20 or about 18%, I think. Yeah, it looks like about 18%. And meanwhile, these other sources like coal has almost barely changed in price at all over the same amount of time. Oil is a completely fluctuating. Oil and gas are completely fluctuating prices because they're dominated by a few major exporting countries that can just control supply and thus demand at will, right? These renewable sources are a much safer and more secure source of energy. One point that I'm going to point out here is nuclear prices, because unlike solar and wind, nuclear prices have actually gone up. Why is that? One, because it's been regulated more heavily.
Yeah.
We've had these massive nuclear disasters in Chernobyl and Fukushima that has made everyone super scared about nuclear energy. So as regulations have gone up, it's become a lot more costly to go through the regulation processes and build these projects. And two, countries haven't standardized its productions, so it hasn't felt the benefit of those learning effects as much. Countries that have standardized its production have seen massive decreases in its price.
Yeah, and you can see that perfect example is in France, right?
Exactly.
France is the key of nuclear energy. Almost their entire electricity grid, if not their entire electric grid, is totally done through nuclear power.
Exactly.
It's one of the reasons that they weren't really hit by the Russian oil shock during the Ukrainian invasion, because they weren't relying on Russian gas and Russian oil.
Mm-hmm.
I have the numbers that we were talking about here. So,
Amazing.
yes, so the fossil fuels of the United States fund the United. Okay, let's go here. Energy. Ugh,
It's hard.
I'm so dumb,
Dude, it's just hard.
bro.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to make sentences like work.
Yeah, we
know
have like
this?
so much information that we've been figuring out that's swimming around, I feel like.
Yes.
It's hard to construct it.
Okay, so 60% of our energy comes from fossil fuels. 40% of that is natural gas.
Okay.
20% of it is coal. Okay. 20% of our energy comes from nuclear.
Okay.
And then 21.5% comes from renewables, 10% being wind, 6 being hydropower, and 3 is solar.
That's impressive. That's
And it
more
goes
than I
down,
expected.
more. And that's kind of the story I actually want to tell, because I think it's more impressive than some of us give credit for.
Yeah.
If we go to different states, we can see different things being more successful than others. Texas is one state that is actually very successful with a lot of its renewable energy development. So it has 46% of its energy coming from natural gas, 18% coming from coal, but 23% coming from wind. 2% coming from solar. But what that tells me is there is so much more room to grow in Texas. The fact that they're already at 25% renewable with 23% wind and only 2% solar, already at 25% renewable. If they get that solar number up, they're already above the national average.
Yeah.
For renewable development, right?
Yeah.
So that's already awesome to see. And that's in Texas.
Nice.
That's in Ruby Red, Texas we're talking about.
Totally. We might not have talked about this before, but a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act incentives are probably going to go to red states.
Most of it goes to red states.
Yeah, that are building out these projects, because a lot of them are the ones that are hardest hit by climate change, like in the South, and they need more energy security.
Yeah.
These sources can give them that. But I think it's really interesting to talk about, there is still a huge gap here, right? There's still so much energy being generated from fossil fuels, and I want to ask why that is. Part of it is intermittency, and I do have on here that battery prices have also been decreasing precipitously.
Yeah.
For the past about 20 years or more. They're still too expensive to completely solve the intermittency problem, which is, of course, that the sun doesn't always shine, wind doesn't always blow, so you need really solid energy storage to be able to rely on renewables. That is a part of it, a small part of it that's being attacked fiercely right now. Mm-hmm. But a big part of it is called carbon lock-in. So this occurs because carbon generating sources have become so integrated into our systems that, one, the cost to produce one more unit of energy at existing coal or oil plants might still be less than the cost of making a whole new renewable energy plant, right? Plus, the C-suite executives of dinosaur utility companies, even if they can make the shift from fossil fuels to renewables and have those shifts be profitable, they're just too stuck in the groupthink to actually believe that. They think it's too much change.
They also don't really have the incentive. They're making good profits now. They don't have a strong incentive to switch away from that, and there isn't a government function right now or even a market function at the moment to really make these companies feel the effects of emitting carbon.
Yes.
Right.
Well, that's the thing. Similarly to how before with our healthcare deep dive, we talked about local monopolies with hospitals. Utilities work the same way.
Oh, yeah.
Utilities are all local companies and often local monopolies if transmission lines aren't built out robustly enough to be able to get energy from different sources. So these utility companies are highly incentivized to lobby to make it really hard to make new energy sources, or to allow new energy sources and to build new transmission lines in their areas of dominance. They do everything they can to make it hard for other companies. I have a great article here from Mother Jones that shows...
He's been so excited to read this to me.
Oh my God. That shows exactly how hard this is, or how hard they try to make it hard for other companies. Okay? So let me see. Let me find this. Let me find this specific story.
Isn't that what you have on the sheet?
That's part of it, but there's more.
Okay.
I have so much to read here.
Okay.
So these companies will go past legal bounds. Okay. Something happened in Ohio. In March, a jury found Larry Householder, the former Speaker of the Ohio House, guilty of racketeering and accepting bribes. So First Energy is a large electric utility based in Ohio. For years, it had been trying to collect bailouts for some of its nuclear and coal plants that were struggling to make money. They tried with the Trump administration, and to the Trump administration's credit, they didn't give the bailouts to the Ohio, to First Energy. But First Energy found their guy in Householder. As part of an agreement to avoid trial, First Energy paid the Justice Department $230 million and admitted to all of the following, okay? They routed $61 million through nonprofit groups that don't have to disclose their donors, and First Energy did not have to disclose giving them money. So some of this $61 million was passed to Larry Householder, who used it for personal expenses, hence the bribery charges. But most of the money went, during Ohio's 2018 primary season, to elect a slate of Republicans who had pledged loyalty to Householder.
That's insanity.
Dude, it is like high level corruption. Like it is textbook corruption.
When we talk about the influence of money in politics, there it is, guys. That's all it is. That's all it takes.
And so this had specific legislative effects. Householders' payback to First Energy was to pass House Bill 6, which offered over $1 billion in subsidies to First Energy's coal and nuclear plants. Okay?
Wow.
And that's not all. First Energy also admitted it had paid more than $20 million over 10 years to a guy named Sam Randazzo. $4 million of that came a couple of years ago, just before Randazzo was appointed as First Energy's top regulator on the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio.
Oh my God.
So we know that this bribery happened. We know it hasn't only that the bribery money didn't only come from Ohio ratepayers, but also Pennsylvania, New Jersey, West Virginia, and Maryland ratepayers.
Oh my God, that's insanity.
Okay, but I need to tell you about one more that I think is even crazier. Okay, so there's one more corruption scandal involving utility interventions to elect Republicans in Florida. Florida Power and Light's CEO, Eric Salegi, unexpectedly announced his early retirement recently. So FPL disputes a lot of this, but it's been reported and it's pretty airtight. They're accused of paying political consultants who then routed money to dark money groups they created for these purposes. Those dark money groups bankrolled unaffiliated independent candidates in state legislative elections who were designed to siphon votes away from candidates disfavored by the utility, who in every case happened to be Democrats.
Wait, that's insane, because I remember during the last election cycle, there were actual like Florida House seats that had the same name as the Democrat candidate, and they had no name. I mean, I'm sorry, they had the same name as the Democrat candidate, but they had no picture next to their face, and that the votes that went to that independent candidate flipped it from a Democrat seat to a Republican seat. It made the difference. Yeah. Is that what you're about to talk about?
That is exactly what I'm about to talk about.
I saw that the night of the election. I was like, what is going on down there?
Yeah. In one case, the candidate's main attribute was that they had the same last name as the Democrat.
Oh, no.
The CEO who resigned had said in an email to two other FPL executives, writing about one of the targets, who is Jose Javier Rodriguez, "I want you to make his life a living hell." And Rodriguez lost re-election by 32 votes.
That's literally the person I was that's the person I was looking at that night. I was shocked that this happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's insanity.
It is
because of a utility company that did this?
Yes.
These utility companies are insane.
It is peak corruption. It's peak corruption, okay? So that's what these fossil fuel companies are doing to hold on to their established power. They are among the top lobbyers and campaign spenders in their states. They will keep playing as bad actors because our rules aren't enforced strictly enough. So take First Energy in Ohio, right? They paid that $230 million fine. The company had $11 billion in revenue in 2021.
They don't give a shit about that fine.
$230 million is like a rounding error to them, okay? So we've talked about this with, I don't remember what we talked about this with, where the punishment for companies isn't enough.
We talked about this with forming unions. And many of these cases, when the punishment for crimes is just fines, a company is going to do a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah.
And the company is going to see, oh, wait a second. The profit I'm going to make by breaking this law is way more than the fine I'm going to get for breaking it.
Yep.
So I'm just going to break the law and pay the fine. Who cares?
The exact same problem here. No one went to jail. They just got fined $230 million, and they can write that off easy.
Yeah.
Right? Because the profits have already outpaced that 230 million.
It's the best investment these guys have ever made, is bribing and buying out your politicians.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that makes super PACs so dangerous in this country. Because of super PACs, these guys were able to funnel money. Okay. Another thing that makes these guys able to funnel money is the money that they're able to accumulate in the first place.
Yeah.
When people are able to accumulate this much power and this much money, specifically over an industry that is so reliant on the public's trust, like a utility company, they're going to use every power in their being to make your voice as small and as worthless as possible and buy out the political process in their favor. So they will go to the extent of putting up a fake candidate to win an election in the worst, most slimy kind of way, because all they care about is the profit margin. They have no morals. They have no care about the political system. So this is why utilities need to become public. They are the ultimate rent seekers in an economy.
Yeah.
And rent seekers, to increase their profits, will always try to corrupt the political system to make their rents higher and higher and higher, because it's the only way that they can truly make more money. They don't have the ability to improve their product and improve their service because they're just rent seekers. And we need to totally eliminate this type of industry from the private sector and nationalize it entirely.
Absolutely. I'm with you. I just thought this was crazy.
No, that was crazy. It's
Absolutely
crazy. It's crazy that I remember this happening that night. And it's crazy that this all comes around and a year later, I learned why.
Yeah.
You know?
And it was this diabolical.
This insanity, dude.
Absurd.
It's insanity. It's so depressing.
So that's my most dramatic reason for why the transition hasn't been faster. Another huge one is permitting.
Oh, permitting, dude. This is a hard one. You know why this is a hard one? Because it has enemies on the left, too.
Yeah, because permitting is also the way that liberals slow down fossil fuel projects, right? They ask for environmental reviews, or environmental impact statements, which take 4 years on average to produce. So we have this issue, and the Biden administration is trying to work on this. But basically, any project that uses federal funds must go through reviews and authorizations, which are mainly due to federal land use protections. There's dozens of them out there that companies have to cross off. And the problem is it's 2023. We have goals set for 2030, for 2050. It takes years to get these up and running. It takes years to pass these permitting requirements, and it takes years more to build these facilities and actually start producing the energy.
And there's permitting reform. The permitting reform could be a bipartisan accomplishment. Joe Manchin has been leading the charge on permitting reform. He wanted to slide it into the Inflation Reduction Act, but he couldn't make it happen. But one of the deals of the Inflation Reduction Act was, okay, Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer, I'll vote for the Inflation Reduction Act, and in return, you build out my Mountain Valley pipeline. That was in the deal. And you make permitting reform so it's easier to build stuff. That was his deal.
Yeah.
Now, the permitting reform has not passed because the Democrats in the House didn't go for it. The progressives killed it.
Yeah.
AOC, Premier Jayapal, they didn't get behind it.
Which I don't entirely blame them for.
I don't either. Because it's not guaranteed that that renewables will get built on it.
No.
There's a terrible, terrible fate that could happen if we do permitting reform and the fossil fuel companies still have this much power that they just decide, screw it. I'm going to go fund this new coal plant. Or not coal, but natural gas power
plant. It could be coal. The bigger picture here is that renewables are only important because the overall amount of greenhouse gases in the air are what cause climate change, right? So they're important as replacements for these CO2 emitting fossil fuel facilities. They're not good just because it's good to have more of them. They're only good because it means we can take away the fossil fuels.
Yes.
So permitting is tough. Tough, but not that tough if you have enough progressives in government. You can definitely find a way to install some language in these bills to say we're gonna make it easier to permit for renewables.
Yeah, if you can make a progressive government, if you can make a progressive coalition big enough, I would love to see that.
Yeah.
The issue is if you got to work with a guy like Joe Manchin, what do we do then?
Yes.
And that's what just makes it hard. The math just gets hard.
Yes, totally. So that was a little bit of a focus of like why it's hard in the U.S. I want to talk a little bit about China, and then I want to hand it over to you soon because I've been talking for.
No, but I think I'm going to be able to jump in here when you talk about China. For a second.
Beautiful. Okay, so China is important to focus on because they're the biggest emitter in the world by far. They emitted more greenhouse gases than the U.S., Europe, and Japan combined in 2022.
I don't want to, defend China here, but it's not per capita. But per capita, the United States is still the largest emitter.
Very true. Very true. But per capita, but because China has such a large population, they're extremely important to our battle. So the weird thing about China is they are still the biggest renewable producer in the world. They lead the world in renewables installation. But like we just said, if they're also burning more and more fossil fuels, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all. Okay, so we need to keep our eye on the ball there. In recent years, China's fossil fuel burning has gone up, and specifically their coal burning.
Their coal burning has gone through the roof in some areas, man.
Yeah.
Because they've been very reliant on, they've been very reliant on coal imported from Australia. They've been very reliant on
Yes, and oil and natural gas imported from other countries as well.
Yes.
And so what happened is China has faced some energy shortages in recent years. I can read off a few here. During the winter of 2017 through 2018, natural gas production problems in Turkmenistan sparked a minor crisis in Chinese electricity markets. Russia's maintenance of a natural gas pipeline in October of 2022 raised eyebrows in Beijing, and they were a little bit worried about what might be going on there. They import a bunch of natural gas from the U.S. still, and Beijing is skeptical about that source. So there are a bunch of places, and of course the importation of Australian coal. There are a bunch of places that they're just not sure that they're going to be able to keep getting energy from. And since China is still dealing with the intermittency problem with renewable sources like everywhere else, it's like we need to have enough of our own coal and enough of our own facilities to dig up coal whenever we need it to be able to be energy secure, to not have these massive blackouts and shortages at certain times.
Well, China could also, I think China's also thinking about this from a green perspective, saying we can achieve energy independence by going green. I think that's definitely a political debate going on in there now, right?
Yeah. Well, that's part of it. They are trying to go green, but they can't completely.
Right.
Because the sun doesn't always shine.
No, you're right, because they're still having the latency problem.
Yeah.
Now, a part of the Paris Agreement was that China agreed to level its carbon emissions at the year 2030. So they are going to, it is already written in that China is going to increase its carbon emissions until the year 2030 and then start cutting them. That's a part of the Paris deal.
Okay.
China, for example, committed to leveling off its carbon emissions no later than 2030.
Okay.
Here's my issue, guys. Since the year 2015, the rate in which China has increased its fossil fuel and carbon emissions has only increased. It has only increased since the Paris Climate Accord.
That's the rate.
That's the rate.
So it's exponential. No, not exponentially, but it's it's second order increase.
Yes, it is. Its second order increase is going hard. 2022 is not well. Ben, you want to look at the chart for me?
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're looking at.
Okay, yeah. So that's insanity. And it does not look like China is leveling off anytime soon.
No.
There are differences. European Union has not only leveled off, they are drastically reducing. They topped off around 4 billion metric tons of CO2 emissions in the 1970s and are now below 3 billion metric tons. Okay? The United States, for all the shit we give our government for not radically attacking climate changes, all of it deserves. The United States has peaked its carbon emissions in 2005, around over 6 billion.
Okay.
Now we are down to 5 billion emissions. The United States peaked their carbon emissions in 2005 at over 6 billion metric tons of CO2. Now, the United States in 2021 has emitted 5 billion metric tons of CO2, and it has only decreased in the next 2 years. And that puts us at around the level of what we were producing in the 1970s. So we have done a fairly good job.
Yeah.
Okay. And now, as a part of the Paris Climate Accord, the United States has committed to cutting overall greenhouse gases emissions by 26 to 28% below the 2005 levels by 2025. Well, bad news. Currently, we have gone from 6.14 billion to 5 billion metric tons of CO2, which is only an 18% reduction so far. We only have a year left to make it 2025.
We won't.
We won't hit it. We might get close. We might hit that 23 number. That's possible.
The permitting.
No. But this is also 2021 data.
Okay.
Right? We don't know 2022 and 2023 yet.
Okay.
If you can find it,
if I can find 2022 at least.
Yeah, at least find 2022.
This is just total emissions.
Yeah, total emissions, total CO2 emissions. Now, the United States has made a lot of progress in the last year here by passing the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the next thing we're going to be talking about. So with the Inflation Reduction Act, this will be able to cut economy-wide carbon emissions by up to 43% by 2030. Now, that's really good to see if we can keep that cut of 43% by 2030. Okay. Specifically in the electric power sector, the EPA said that emissions could be reduced by up to 83% below the 2005 levels.
That's big.
That's big. But we are not on track with the Paris Climate Accord right now.
No.
The IRA could put us closer to it. It probably won't get us closer to that 2025 number, but we might reach these goals in 2027, which I want the United States to be a player and an example on the international stage for the world to follow.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. We should be the leader. The fact that the EU is beating us by so much in its own decline is frustrating.
Well, there's a lot of reasons why the EU is beating us, and one of them is the presence of carbon taxes. If you mind, can I move over to carbon tax?
Please.
Okay. So there are other ways that we can deal with climate change. There are two of them. The first that one of them we have tried in the United States, the other one we haven't. So a carbon tax. What is a carbon tax? A carbon tax is a tax levied on the carbon content of fossil fuels. The term can also refer to taxing other types of greenhouse gas emissions such as methane, but a carbon tax specifically puts a price on those emissions to encourage consumers, businesses, and governments to produce less of them. So this is what we were saying before with that utility company. These guys have no incentive to switch from fossil fuels to renewable energies. But if we put a carbon tax on them and we made carbon more expensive in the market, maybe they would finally switch over. Now, the issue with the carbon tax, and one of the issues I have, is that lower income households, which spend a larger share of their income on emissions intensive goods and services, will see a larger impact due to carbon taxes. There's no doubt. It's a regressive tax at its core.
Okay.
But it depends what you do with the revenue of carbon tax, which actually makes it regressive. It depends how you spend that carbon tax money. There's three things that experts say you're able to do with this.
Okay.
Pair the carbon taxes with large lump sum rebates, give the money back to people, right? Okay. This will greatly impact employment, but will hurt GDP negatively, and will make the taxes more progressive. Okay. Then the next one, you compare it with a cut in the employee side payroll tax. Lower your Social Security and lower your Medicare tax by funding it through carbon taxes, and by funding Social Security and Medicare also through carbon taxes. This will increase progressivity, GDP, and employment. That's like almost best of both worlds.
I guess, but I mean, we already need more tax money to pay for those services, so I feel like we couldn't really feasibly lower the taxes we already have.
Agreed. And then there's the worst case scenario. Paired with a cut in the corporate income tax and increase R&D spending. This will boost GDP and pre-tax wages, but will lessen the productivity and lower employment, but lower the progressivity of the taxes. Point is, carbon taxes aren't that popular because of all the reasons I said. They aren't very progressive. They're regressive.
Yeah.
They hit the poorest the most. But they are effective. A 2017 study estimates a tax of $49 per metric ton of carbon dioxide could raise about $2.2 trillion in net revenue over 10 years from 2019 to 2028. That's how much money we could be making off these carbon taxes. So it's extremely effective at funding the government.
And in reducing emissions?
And so does it work with reducing emissions? Well, we can see what they did in Europe. Mm-hmm. We have found that cumulative reduction in an order of 4 to 6% for a $40 ton of carbon tax. So 4 to 6% reduction in emissions for a $40 per ton of CO2. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So yes, it reduces emissions greatly. If you could see the chart, again, we're going to make a Patreon at some point, and if you give us money, we'll put charts on the screen.
Yeah.
So that'd be a big deal. But the chart shows there's a good correlation between the carbon tax and a decrease in fossil fuel emissions.
I love that.
I know, I love it too, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's the stick side, right?
This is the stick side.
Let's hit people for using carbon. That's the other way to drive adoption of renewables.
Yeah, but it's not the total stick side, because there's an even stickier side. There's a mace side.
Ooh.
Okay. Tradable pollution permits. Tradable pollution permits are similar to carbon taxes, but they're not. If you watched a lot of news during the Obama administration, you would know these as cap and trade. Okay. So tradable permits are a market-based solution to emission control and reduction. Carbon permit markets works on a cap and trade principle, where the government or the appointed agencies set targets for allowed pollution, and industries then bid on the permits that allow them to do the emissions. So the companies,
Interesting.
yes. So say like there is a permit that allows you 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide.
Okay.
That goes on the market. Now companies say, "Oh man, I need to buy this so I can then emit carbon dioxide."
Okay.
So then bidding wars start, and then there becomes a natural price of these carbon permits.
Sure.
And then that incentivizes companies who own permits to then sell permits to companies. If you own a permit and you don't use it, you can then make money by selling that permit to somebody who does need it to emit things. And it's encouraging everyone to lower their overall emittance.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to have to pay this extra cost in their cost of doing business.
I like that a lot.
Yes.
First question. Enforcement mechanism. Is there one? Do you have any idea what it is?
I have no idea what the enforcement mechanism is, but there is one baked into the EPA, because this isn't the first time the United States has done this.
Okay.
The EPA has already done a cap and trade solution with sulfur dioxide, which I'll talk about in a second.
Okay.
So most polluting firms, this is what I just talked about, but I want to give a better breakdown from the article directly, not just me. The most polluting firms will enter the emissions trading market as buyers, and those firms that pollute below their levels can sell their surplus permits. This then forces the polluter to internalize the externality. This is what we talked about before. Companies do not feel the direct effects of carbon emissions, so there's no reasons for them to take it into account in their balance sheet. But if we now force the polluter to internalize this grander humanitarian externality in their balance sheets, now we might see some transition. So over time, polluting firms become less competitive because they have a higher cost of doing business, with the non-polluting firms becoming more competitive. This process continues so that the industry slowly moves from a polluting industry into a greener one. So that's cap and trade.
I do really like the idea. And I can think of legislation right now where you set a number of permits that you're going to sell, say, in year 2024, and then you can set a rate for the next 10 years. How are they going to decrease?
Yep.
Right? Slowly. So companies have to know and understand how to make this transition.
And they can make it it can be very planned, because you can say, okay, guys, these are the permits that we're going to set out over the next 10 years. Be ready for it. But what's the difference between this and a carbon tax? Because initially I'm reading this, they seem very similar, right? I didn't understand the difference yet. Carbon tax puts a price on carbon. Cap and trade puts a price on carbon. What's the difference here? Well, here's the difference. A carbon tax and cap and trade are opposite sides of the same coin. A carbon tax sets the price of carbon dioxide emissions and allows the market to determine the quantity of emission reductions. Cap and trade sets the quantity of emission reductions and lets the market determine the price of carbon.
Yep. I get that.
What a fantastic... I read that article. I'm like, oh my God, this makes so much sense.
Yeah. Perfect.
Perfect connection here. So the United States has had a history with cap and trade, and it was extremely effective. So during the 1990s, we had a big problem with acid rain, and it was caused by a lot of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere, SO2. So under Title IX of the 1990 Clean Air Amendments, Title IV, geez, I'm a Star Wars fan. You'd think I know that.
Yeah, honestly.
Of the 1990 Clean Air Amendments, The CO2, there was a allowance trading program established for sulfur dioxide, and it was the first large-scale pollutant cap and trade system in the world. America used to be a leader on stuff like this, not anymore. The stated purpose of the acid rain program was to reduce total SO2 emissions in the U.S. by 10 million tons relative to 1980. By 2007, annual emissions had declined below the program's 9 million ton goal, a 43% reduction from the 1990 levels, despite electricity generation from coal-fired power plants increasing more than 26% between 1990 and 2007. So sulfur dioxide came from dirty carbon. So what happened was, okay, you put a price on dirty carbon. Okay, we're going to go to clean carbon. And you can hear a lot of times, you heard Trump on the campaign trail talking about, we want clean coal. It didn't make much sense to me. Well, that's what he's talking about with clean coal. He's talking about low sulfur coal, which is more expensive than dirty coal. But because of the cap and trade stuff that was baked in, it became more expensive to use the dirty coal. That's what we can do with carbon.
Yes.
That's what we can do with carbon.
It's what we probably need to do with carbon.
Issue. Because cap and trade sets the quantity, not the price of carbon, government planners might set the quantity of carbon that is possible too low. It might be possible that we set the carbon level too low for industry to handle, and we have total energy problems.
Of course.
If we have the carbon tax, we put the price on carbon, companies pay it, and then the quantity gets evened out. But then the issue there is, did we set the price of carbon too low or too high to incentivize the right change?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know where I'm going to fall on this. We need the forcing solution.
Wow, so you're going on the stick. Normally you're carrot. You're normally the carrot guy.
I mean, I want both.
Okay, and I mean, you want the IRA and you want the cap and trade.
Of course. But I don't want to risk just having the rich be like, okay, we can just keep emitting, right? We can afford the carbon tax.
Right.
Like, I don't want the gradual shift from the carbon tax to move the economy a little bit. I want to say, this is all we can do. This is all we're allowing you to do, okay? And it's going to get less and less, and we know that it's going to get less and less at this rate.
And that's why you asked me about the enforcement mechanism. Well, during the Obama administration, he tried cap and trade, and it didn't work. Industry didn't take it. It got fought in the courts.
Okay.
And there was a lot of issues. Cap and trade has had a lot of issues in the courts since the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s.
Okay, I'm curious about what specifically those are.
I can't tell you because I already went too deep here.
Yeah, I know. No, that's fine. But I'm guessing it's not constitutional. Maybe it's constitutional.
No, I think it's constitutional, just not done under current statute because he tried to do it under executive authority. So I think he's trying to apply the cap and trade system that was done for the SO2 and then apply it to CO2.
My point being, statute could enable it.
And I think I'm in favor of it. I think I am in favor of the cap and trade system in combination with incentives.
Yeah, it's another one of those things where, yes, like almost everything we talk about, if you go too far, it's a problem. But at least with the current administration, it seems like we have some pretty good analysts working on these things to figure out what the right amount on the spectrum would be for cap and trade.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to work as hard as we can to attack that. What I'm also thinking is maybe you could make it even more specific about what industries, I mean, I think you even said this, what industries are you capping and by how much, right? More necessary industries, you can have higher caps, so there's a little bit more wiggle room. But things like, I don't know, alcohol production, if they're emitting carbon, you can force them to emit less carbon than you would force other.
That's a little harder now because now what you just said is breaking the notion of cap and trade. Because the point, the philosophy, which I agree with you. I agree with what you just said.
Sure.
But the philosophy behind cap and trade is a market-based solution. And the companies that need carbon the most will be the ones to purchase it on the open market and determine the price of carbon. So it's going to be hard to then make this open marketplace of carbon permits and then say, okay, we have an open market for carbon permits, but if you're an alcohol distillery, you pay a 20% premium on all your purchases off this open market.
What about insular markets by industry?
That is interesting. I think that's a great idea. But now you're getting even harder.
Yes.
Now you're saying that
Yes.
now you're saying that the government planners need to be able to permit the correct number of CO2 to not just the overall general economy, but now to each specific industry.
True.
And those carbon permits can't cross into other industry sectors.
Yes.
So that's even harder.
Yes. Admittedly.
Yes.
Okay.
That's even harder.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
I do. And that's where, like, I don't know, we probably would need to do several weeks
Of research
data
to figure
analysis.
this out.
Yeah, to understand whether that's possible.
People get paid probably full-time wages to figure out what we're talking about
Totally.
here.
But that's why we're the idea guys. That's why we should be like elected as the high-level officials and the president, and we'd be like, that's a good idea, go figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love figuring it out. Listen, you know me, guys. I got that master's in math. I did that awesome breakdown of the jobs thing the other day. I love that, but I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
I don't have the time.
No, nor do I.
But so cap and trade, I think it's a really, really interesting idea.
I agree.
And it's not as regressive as carbon taxes.
No.
Right?
No. It falls much more on the companies.
Much more on the companies.
Yeah.
Much more on the companies. But now let's get into what the United States has done as of late, because I think this is what's the really exciting stuff. Let's talk about the effects of the IRA. So you start off, and then I'll make some additions wherever I find necessary.
Sure. So generally, of course, it's important to subsidize renewable projects, just like I just talked about with the prices or the cost of solar and wind going down. That happened because early on in those processes, the government subsidized research that went into making them cheaper and cheaper in the manufacturing. So since the IRA is happening now, even though the cost curve now has brought solar and wind underneath natural gas, coal, and oil, it's going to drive implementation of these plants that much faster. And it's going to drive our learning curve, like our learning rate, that much harder. So in its first year, the Inflation Reduction Act has led to companies announcing over $110 billion in clean energy manufacturing investments, including $10 billion in solar manufacturing. I'm going to point out right now, $70 billion of that is in the EV supply chain, and that's probably going to be our next deep dive, which is also awesome. It's created more than 170,000 new clean energy jobs already. And over the next 7 years, we expect twice as much solar, wind, and battery deployment as we would have had without it.
It's insanity. There are $216 billion worth of tax credits baked in for corporations to receive. But as we've talked about, that number can go way up if the demand is there.
Yeah.
There really isn't that hard of a cap on it.
No.
Right? That was just what they expected the market would ask for. But we're seeing that very much outpaced. The IRA also not just incentivizes the clean energy production in corporations, it also incentivizes and subsidizes the consumers' adoption of renewable energy technology. In the IRA, there are $43 billion in tax credits aimed to lower the emissions by making electric vehicles, energy-efficient appliances, rooftop solar panels, geothermal heating, and home batteries.
That's awesome.
This is designed to make it more affordable on the consumer end, on your end, on my end, on our end. So this is some of those subsidies. $2,000 per year consumer tax credit for the purchase of a heat pump, $30 per milliwatt hour for zero carbon electricity generation, $15 per megawatt hour for power production from nuclear facilities, $4,000 per vehicle for EVs, $1.75 per gallon for production of mixture of sustainable aviation fuel. That's probably only that, unless you're a private jet owner, you're probably not thinking about that.
Yeah.
And then $3 per kilogram for the production of qualified clean hydrogen. So you're going to be affected by this at the end of tax season. And if you do these electric vehicle and green energy improvements to your home, you're going to see that money in your pocketbook.
Several thousands of dollars, legitimately.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible.
It actually, like, as you read that off, I was thinking maybe I should reach out to my landlord. Like, see if he could get this happening at my apartment.
True. Wait a second. Yeah. What do you think the cost would be to implement a heat pump in some of these buildings?
probably less than. I mean, the question is, they're just passing the cost on the renters.
Yeah, but that's
right?
fine.
So,
it would be cheaper than what we have now, probably.
yeah,
After this, well, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what it would be like.
I don't either.
But that is a good mindset. I like that.
Yeah.
In addition to all this amazing stuff that it's doing on the consumer end, on the demand end, and on the supply end, it's also doing a lot on the intellectual end. To help build stronger, more diverse science, technology, and engineering and math, STEM talent, the manufacturing facilities are only eligible for full IRA tax credits if they meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. That's what I love to see. But I wish there was just one more comma. Collective bargaining rights. I wish there was just one more in there.
Yeah.
You know, we got so close. We met so close with the prevailing wage and the apprenticeship requirements. Wish we could have just said open to unionized workforces, right?
Yeah. Again, not unlimited money.
Not unlimited money.
But I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know liberal little you.
Liberal
You
me,
want
baby.
everything.
Liberal, big capital L, liberal New Deal Democrat me.
Yeah.
But dude, like, I know it's very easy to doom and gloom on climate change, but honestly, after reading this, I don't know if I felt a lot of doom and gloom.
No, I felt more excited. I feel more in the middle, I think.
Yeah.
Because we're already over 1 degree of warming. Like, we're already in the range for some of these climate tipping points. I'm still scared, but I'm really encouraged by how well these global communities are actually coalescing and paying attention to how big of a problem this is and attacking it.
They are. And
They're
they are
taking
attacking
it seriously.
I wish that there was, this is a hard truth. We lost a lot of valuable time by electing Trump. Those 4 years, we lost a lot of time.
Yeah.
We can't make that mistake again, guys. We cannot.
No.
We'll talk about this more as the election season gets hotter, but we cannot make the mistake of electing somebody who thinks climate change is a hoax. The world cannot afford it.
No, we're actually honestly, if we ever get out of the climate change woods, until then, we literally can't afford electing a Republican.
No, it's
unless
not.
This becomes like part of bipartisan.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's life or death.
Until the Republicans can get on board with something like the Inflation Reduction Act, they are not reliable partners in this fight.
Yeah.
And because of Donald Trump, we missed our Paris Climate Agreement goals. The Inflation Reduction Act is trying its best to get us back on there and maybe reach the right rate or meet us or get us where we need to be by 2027, maybe, right? But the fact that we made that mistake by electing Donald Trump set us back so far.
Huge setback.
It's a huge setback, and it made us unserious to the rest of the world on this fight.
Yeah. This is why the EU is beating us by so much.
That's why the EU is beating us so much. And the next thing is we just got to take on China. We need to take on China.
Yeah. We need to convince. The China problem is so interesting because our tension with them is causing this. Like, this is because they're being more isolated from the global system. That's why they're feeling less secure about their energy. That's why they're feeling the need to dig up all this coal and why they're burning so much of it when they can't produce their energy with all of their renewables.
And I think that's why Biden, whenever he goes on TV, he never says that the U.S. is decoupling from China. Even though we can see it in all the data, he never says it.
Yep.
He never says decoupling.
It's why the U.S. climate envoy John Kerry recently made a visit there, because we see how important they are. We cannot leave them out of this, right? Like climate change is a global phenomenon. So we can't. It's hard to kind of balance competition, but also like China is like you said before, it's beneficial for them to transition to clean energy.
It is. It's in their interest. They don't want to be reliant on imports through the Strait of Malacca or from coal from Australia, which is a very hard U.S. ally. They don't want that.
Plus, they're the biggest producer of the technology, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a way to make the rest of the world more dependent on them and to have big income streams from exports.
How do you feel about Nikki Haley's criticism of the Inflation Reduction Act by saying we're subsidized Chinese production?
We talked about this a little bit. I think it's completely accurate.
It's a poignant criticism.
But I think it's okay.
Right. It's okay for where we're at right now. Yeah. And it also shows, I think it does something to show that to the Chinese government that, we have our disagreements, but we're going to fight climate change, and it's okay if you profit off of it because we need to get this done.
Yeah, well, to be honest,
but we're also encouraging solar production in the U.S. through the Inflation Reduction Act now, so that could change, right?
Yes.
We're not always going to be relying on China for the technology because of Joe Biden and the Democrat economic policies. We are going to become green energy efficient down the line, but just for right now, we're still relying on some Chinese input products.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they really do have dominance over the supply chain. So it's going to be a relatively slow build out as to onshoring and nearshoring manufacturing of those solar cells. But this is one of those things where until they do invade Taiwan, let's keep buying.
Absolutely. We got to do it.
As long as we can, this is more important. Let's keep buying. It's just like Germany with Russia, right? Once Russia invaded Ukraine, they were like, fuck. We can't keep buying their gas. Except right now we need to keep buying their gas. So let's keep buying their gas, but now really put the pedal to the metal as hard as we can to build out our own energy production.
Right, and that was the German mistake that we won't repeat. Germany became reliant on Russia for their energy needs because they thought it would make a good geopolitical partnership. It didn't. They messed up, and they got screwed because they didn't have anything in the pipeline, and they had to start opening up coal plants in order to, keep their lights on.
Yes.
U.S. isn't making that mistake. We are going to say, okay, China, we're going to keep buying from you. We know that you are our geopolitical competition. We're going to keep buying from you, but also we're going to do massive government subsidies into our own local production, so eventually we don't have to buy so much from you.
Exactly.
This was my favorite episode we've ever done.
I had a great time.
I had a great time, man. All right.
Beautiful.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, people. See ya.